Chapter 244. Yun Ruoyan stared at Wei Hai, waiting for his reply. Wei Hai smiled. Your constitution is that of a human furnace. Just as Wei Hai was about to reveal the secret that Liu Mo had kept from Yun Ruoyan all this time, he suddenly sensed several powerful auras approaching. Wei Hai immediately shut up. Yun Ruoyan had also sensed those auras, and one of them was Liu Mo's familiar aura. Speak. Yun Ruoyan couldn't care less about anything else as she pressed Wei Hai. But Wei Hai's expression changed greatly. He could not be bothered to continue his words just now and stood up all at once. You're here so quickly. He looked at Yun Ruoyan. The slaughtering king really does treasure you. He then opened the cage and dragged Yun Ruoyan to the entrance of the cave. Finish what you're saying. Yun Ruoyan asked urgently as she was dragged to the entrance of the cave. Beneath her feet was a bottomless abyss. I don't have time to waste on you. Let's escape first. Wei Hai pulled Yun Ruoyan down the abyss. Hey! Yun Ruoyan yelped in surprise. Wei Hai's body had begun to transform. Black feathers sprouted from his arms, neck, head, and face. In a few breaths, Wei Hai had transformed from a human into a strange bird. Yun Ruoyan was currently lying on top of the bird's body. Just then, Yun Ruoyan saw two sword auras appear in front of her, one of which was a black-robed Liu Mo. The other was also a black-robed man. Yun Ruoyan recognized him as Su Bei, and he was accompanied by a middle-aged man dressed in official robes, the far-sighted king, Li Xing. Yen, Li Mo's voice drifted over from afar, a barely detectable tremor in his voice. In the past 2 days and 1 night, Liu Mo had felt an unprecedented sense of worry and anxiety. Li Xing led them through a series of twists and turns before finally finding Yun Ruoyan. His heart couldn't relax. When Wei Hai saw the people in front of him, he immediately turned around and fled. Wei Hai, put Yen down, and I'll let you die a quick death, Liu Mo's voice rang out from behind Wei Hai. Wei Hai, you traitor. Stop right there. Li Xing also yelled. Wei Hai sensed the danger of the situation, but he ignored the two of them and used all his strength to escape. Wei Hai, you won't be able to escape. If we can't escape, we'll just die together. Wei Hai said coldly. You don't look like someone who would risk his life. As Yun Ruoyan spoke, she gripped the feathers on Wei Hai's back tightly. Because Wei Hai was too fast, the wind was so strong that Yun Ruoyan felt as if she could be blown off the ground at any moment. She could only hold on to Wei Hai's feathers tightly and press her body against his to barely stabilize herself. Miss Yun, you seem to value your life more than I do, Wei Hai said. If you don't want to die, you have to hurry up. As Wei Hai spoke, his already fast speed increased once more. You beast. The far-sighted king's voice rang out by her ear. Hurry up and let Miss Yun go. How dare you betray me like this? Your master is a loyal man. Aren't you afraid that he'll be disappointed in the afterlife? Li Xing's tone was full of sorrow. Your master and senior sister are gone. Now, you're the only one left. How can this king watch you seek your own death? Quickly let go of Miss Yun and this king can spare your life. It can also be considered as comforting the souls of your master and senior sister in heaven. Humph. Wei Hai sneered. You're really good at brainwashing people. My master and senior sister were brainwashed by you, and that's why they lost their lives. I'm not as stupid as they are. As soon as Wei Hai finished speaking, a green streak of light flashed past him. Liu Mo's figure was blocking his path. At first, Liu Mo didn't dare to chase too closely, afraid that Wei Hai would do something to harm Yun Ruoyan. From Li Sheng, Liu Mo had learned that Wei Hai was known as the Poison Prince, and that his entire body was filled with poisonous bugs, some of which could instantly poison a person to death. Even though Liemo had already caught up to Wei Hai, he didn't dare to chase too closely. Instead, he maintained a distance of about 15 feet. Damn it, what a fast speed! Wei Hai growled and changed the direction of his escape again. A green light flashed in front of Wei Hai's eyes again. Liemo had once again appeared in front of him, and this time, Su Bei had also rushed over. The two of them formed a pincer attack on Wei Hai. Wei Hai, how about I make a deal with you? Seeing that Wei Hai had nowhere to run, Yun Ruoyan spoke up. What deal? Wei Hai asked. Agree to 2 of my requests, and I'll beg Liemo to spare your life. 2 requests. Wei Hai said, tell me about them. First, tell me who the traitor to Kongming Academy is. Second, finish what you wanted to say. Wei Hai thought for a moment. I can't fulfill the first request, because I don't know either. All I know is from the far-sighted king himself. As for the second request, if I were to tell you, I'm afraid you wouldn't even be able to die. Wei Hai couldn't help but think of the slaughtering king's infuriating corpses. He had already touched Li Mo's sore spot once, so he decided to leave a way out for himself. Wei Hai, hurry up and release Miss Yun. Do you really not want to live anymore? Li Xing said with a pained expression. Old geezer, don't put on an act with me, Wei Hai sneered. I didn't expect you to find me even after I hid here. I'm curious, though, how did you find this place? Black Robe had once taught Wei Hai that a cunning rabbit has 3 burrows. He had also prepared 3 extremely secretive locations within 500 miles of where they lived, which was the far-sighted king's residence, as hiding places when they escaped. Wei Hai was extremely confident in these locations, and they were one of the reasons why he had dared to kidnap Yun Ruoyan. What he hadn't expected was that Liemo and the others would find him in just 2 short days. I, the far-sighted king, am naturally confident in my abilities. You crafty rabbits have 3 burrows, and even if I'm not sure of the exact location, I have a pretty good idea. However, you actually dared to betray this king, which is beyond my expectations. The far-sighted king sighed. Since you're courting death, don't blame me for not protecting you. Then cut the crap and come at me. Wei Hai shouted as he charged toward the far-sighted king. Li Xing immediately hid behind Su Bei, but Wei Hai turned around and released a red mist spider at Liemo, a diversion. Liemo, be careful of the spider. Yun Ruoyan tried to stop the spider, but she was 1 step too late, and it reached Liemo in an instant. As if he hadn't heard her, Liemo continued to stand on his sword, his hands behind his back. For a moment, Wei Hai thought that he had succeeded, but he quickly realized that he had been too naive. When the red mist spider arrived in front of Liemo, it was blocked by a layer of spiritual energy around Liemo's body, unable to advance an inch. Liemo looked at the tiny red mist spider trapped in the spiritual energy membrane, and a blue light flashed in his eyes. With a poof, the red mist spider turned into a ball of red mist and disappeared. Wei Hai's heart skipped a beat, and he immediately sent out a series of venomous bugs at Liemo. Every single one of them was blocked by Liemo's spiritual barrier, and they exploded into mist at the same time. The sound of the poisonous insects exploding filled the air for a while. Your Highness, I'd like to make a deal with you. Seeing that he really couldn't break through Liemo's defenses, Wei Hai suddenly had an idea. I don't make deals with others, Liemo replied. This is a secret that only you and I know about, Miss Yun, Wei Hai said hurriedly. Slaughtering King, you'll regret it if you don't make this deal. Liemo frowned, but didn't speak. Wei Hai continued, if you spare my life, I'll keep this secret forever. Otherwise, I'll tell Miss Yun right now. Given her personality, if she learns of this secret, she won't let you have your way. Wei Hai's words made Liemo's expression even darker. Yun Ruoyan was even more curious and confused. Wei Hai, what secret does it have to do with me? Yun Ruoyan knew that Wei Hai wouldn't tell her, but but she couldn't help asking. As expected, Wei Hai ignored her question and continued to stare at Li Mo, waiting for his answer. "All right, I promise not to kill you. Return yen to me right now," Li Mo replied after a moment's thought. "Slaughtering King, you're a man of your word." Wei Hai didn't seem to believe Li Mo's words. "If I go back on my word, I'll be struck by lightning." Li Mo repeated Wei Hai's words. "Now, can you return yen to me? Since you've already made your vow, I'm relieved." Wei Hai flew downward. Li Mo and Su Bei followed suit. When they reached the ground, they retracted their swords, and Wei Hai reverted to his human form. "Here's the antidote." Wei Hai took out an antidote and handed it to Yun Ruoyan. "Eat this antidote, and the poison in your body will be completely cured." Yun Ruoyan had already recovered from the effects of Qiu Qiu's antidote, but she still took the antidote from Wei Hai. Yun Ruoyan could tell that although Wei Hai's cultivation wasn't very high, he was definitely a very skilled poisoner. Sometimes, he could even put his own poisons into the bodies of venomous insects, making them even more venomous. It wouldn't be a bad idea to keep one of such a genius poisoner's pills for future research. Yun Ruoyan took the antidote, put it away, and walked briskly toward Li Mo. "How did you? You didn't eat my antidote." "That's impossible," Wei Hai exclaimed in disbelief. Given Yun Ruoyan's cultivation, she would be able to beat Wei Hai to a pulp once she recovered her cultivation, but she had pretended that she hadn't. It seemed that Yun Ruoyan had been putting on an act all this time, all so that she could pry out his secrets. Just as Yun Ruoyan was about to speak, she saw Su Bei appear behind Wei Hai. In his hand was Wei Hai's unique flexible sword, which he thrust into Wei Hai's chest from behind. Chapter 245. Wei Hai's eyes widened as he looked down at the sword in his chest. He hadn't expected Li Mo to break his oath. The people of the Qinyuan continent believed in the supernatural, and oaths were the most important thing to them. How could Li Mo break his oath? "Break your oath. Aren't you afraid of being struck by lightning?" Wei Hai looked at Li Mo. What Wei Hai didn't know was that being struck by lightning wasn't a big deal to Li Mo. Li Mo didn't even look at Wei Hai, his gaze was fixed on Yun Ruoyan. Yun Ruoyan, on the other hand, was looking at Wei Hai. Before he could tell her what she wanted to know, he had died just like that. Su Bei pulled out his sword, and fresh blood spurted out from the wound on Wei Hai's chest. Suddenly, Yun Ruoyan felt a warm sensation on her body. Li Mo had walked to her side and draped his robe over her shoulders. Wei Hai coughed up a mouthful of blood, and his body slumped to the ground. As he took his last breath, he used the last of his strength to look at Yun Ruoyan. "If you want to know, ask the old turtle." "Who's the old tortoise? Where can I find him?" Yun Ruoyan asked hurriedly, but Wei Hai had already breathed his last. Li Mo glanced at Su Bei, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "That feathered beast really deserves to die." The far-sighted king, Li Xing, walked over and looked disdainfully at Wei Hai's lifeless body. Yun Ruoyan turned to look at Li Xing, her tone mocking. "This feathered brute seemed to have been ordered by you to kidnap me, didn't he? His death isn't to be regretted, but neither are you." Although Wei Hai didn't strike Yun Ruoyan as a good person, he was at least an upright one. Li Sheng, on the other hand, left an extremely poor impression on Yun Ruoyan. Yun Ruoyan's previous impression of the far-sighted king had all come from the mouths of others. Yun Ruoyan felt that a man who could lie low for more than a decade in order to obtain the power he desired had to be a remarkable character, even if he wasn't a hero. However, after seeing Li Xing's despicable behavior, Yun Ruoyan felt that he really didn't live up to his reputation. In front of the emperor of the Li kingdom, Li Xiu, he was a far cry. Although Li Xiu was all smiles, he was actually quite astute, as evidenced by his attitude toward Li Mo. Li Xing, on the other hand, had offended Li Mo as soon as he arrived. Apart from the Beastmen War many years ago, Li Mo had never participated in the politics of the Li Kingdom. Apart from the Beastkin War many years ago, Li Xing had never participated in the affairs of the kingdom again. Yun Ruoyan felt that with Li Xing's inability to grasp the situation, even if he were to rebel, it would be difficult for him to accomplish anything significant. Miss Yun, this prince was only joking with you. I didn't really want to do anything to you. Li Yun replied. Li Xing straightened his back and assumed the posture of a prince. If it weren't for this prince, Miss Yun wouldn't have been able to be saved. Sheng Yun Mo, Li Yun said. Yun Ruoyan didn't think that Li Mo would let Li Xing off so easily, but to her surprise, Li Mo simply waved at Su Bei. King Li, Su Li, immediately, Xing to King, Umo, Yun, Li, Yun Xing Mo, Xing had to say. You're letting him off just like that? Yun Ruoyan turned to Li Mo. After all, Li Xing was the main culprit, and she wasn't willing to let him off so easily. Furthermore, she had a request for Li Xing. She wanted to go to the far-sighted king's manor and look through her own records. There'll be plenty of opportunities to vent your anger in the future. Right now, we have to hurry back to Kongming Mountain, Li Mo said. Did something happen at the academy? Yun Ruoyan asked when she saw Li Mo's serious expression. Nothing's happened at the academy, Li Mo replied. But the first elder sent me a message that the portal to the alternate dimension will open a year in advance. We'll need to select a new batch of students to enter the alternate dimension and train them. The portal would only open once every 3 years, but this time, it would open a year in advance. This meant that the students would only have a year to train. Compared to the past, time was of the essence. In that case, let's hurry back. Yun Ruoyan had heard from Li Mo that the first requirement to enter the alternate dimension was to become an 8th rank blade master. Only after reaching 8th rank could a blade master begin to cultivate their own flying swords and become a true blade master. Only by becoming a true blade master would one be able to enter the alternate dimension and fight for treasures. Otherwise, they'd be nothing more than cannon fodder. Even someone like Li Mo, who was a 9th rank blade master and infinitely close to becoming a sword saint, would be nothing more than an ordinary cultivator in the alternate dimension. As a result, this year's training would be extremely important to both Li Mo and Yun Ruoyan. How are you feeling after being poisoned? Li Mo asked when he saw Yun Ruoyan's pale complexion. I'm fine. The poison's been cured. Let's head out now. A few hours later, just as the sky was turning dark, Yun Ruoyan and Li Mo returned to Kongming Academy. Li Mo first sent Yun Ruoyan back to her cottage by the cliff before heading to the southern tower. The first elder was waiting for him there. Master, why did the portal suddenly open so early? Li Mo asked the first elder. The great elder's expression was also rather solemn. I don't have the authority to ask too much about the matters of the other world. It's just that I suddenly received a message from the heavens I mirror, and the number of people entering the other world this time has increased by 10. You're saying that Kongming Academy will be sending 30 students into the alternate dimension. Li Mo's tone was slightly shocked. In the past, 20 students had entered the alternate dimension, but 30 this time. 30 students wasn't a large number for Kongming Academy's 3,000 students, but it wasn't easy for them to recruit 8th rank blade masters. The new batch of students was, on average, a 5th rank blade master. Even among the older students, there weren't many 8th rank blade masters. 38th rank and above blade masters were almost all of Kongming Academy's elite students. Although Li Mo had never entered the alternate dimension before, having grown up in Kongming Academy, he was very familiar with the alternate dimension that only happened once every 3 years. Coupled with the first elder's tutelage, Li Mo was the only person in the entire Kongming Academy who understood the alternate dimension better than anyone else. Those who hadn't entered the alternate dimension believed that it was filled with treasures, spiritual herbs, and that it must be a land of immortals. As a result, they all desperately wanted to explore it. Liamo had been no exception. It was only after the first elder explained the situation in detail to Liamo that he gained a clearer understanding of the alternate dimension. While it was true that the alternate dimension was filled with treasures, it was also a land of tigers and wolves. There were many existences in the alternate dimension that the people of the Qinyuan continent couldn't even begin to imagine, and all of them possessed monstrous cultivation. 8th-rank blade masters were like ants in front of them. If they moved even the slightest bit, they'd be dead without even a trace of their bodies left to rot. As a result, very few of the students who entered the alternate dimension ever returned. But when they did, without exception, become one of the most powerful individuals on the Qinyuan continent, and without exception, they all refused to allow their most valued children to enter Kongming Academy. Yun Maxiao, Wang Meng, and a number of other talented students had all been rejected by their parents. Wang Meng had only managed to enter the academy because of a special reason, and that had been without his father's knowledge. Tomorrow, there will be a meeting of the elders to draw up a list of students to enter the alternate dimension, the first elder began. The first elder turned to Liamo. Anyone who's a 6th-rank blade master or higher has a chance of being chosen. That lass, Yun Ruoyan, is already a 6th-rank blade master. What are your plans? She'll only be of age next year, and I naturally don't want her to enter such a cruel place as soon as she's of age. Liamo sighed almost imperceptibly. I originally wanted to wait until she was a little older before going with her to the alternate dimension. But she's looking forward to this trip, and I have to participate as well. I'll analyze the pros and cons with her, and if she's willing, I'll bring her along. If not, I won't force her. The next morning, after a night's rest, Yun Ruoyan's energy had mostly recovered. Early in the morning, Yun Ruoyan made some preparations before heading to the bamboo garden to ask Lin Qingqin to accompany her to the Southern College for lessons. She wondered if missing 2 days of classes would affect her progress, and if she could get Liamo to write her a leave of absence. At that moment, Liamo suddenly floated in through the window. Yun Ruoyan was already used to Liamo's habit. After a moment's hesitation, Yun Ruoyan asked, "Has there been a new development in the alternate dimension?" Liamo walked over, somewhat speechless, and hugged Yun Ruoyan's petite body. "I've spent a lot of effort to get to get close to me. Why do I feel like you've returned to your previous coldness toward me?" "Have I?" Yun Ruoyan murmured in Liamo's embrace. Even Yun Ruoyan herself didn't realize that she had subconsciously distanced herself from Liamo. Liamo guessed that Wei Hai must have said something to Yun Ruoyan, but judging from Yun Ruoyan's attitude, it seemed that she didn't know much about it, so she only seemed to dislike him a little. Liamo thought that he should find an opportunity to tell Yun Ruoyan about the human furnace, but the most important matter at the moment was the alternate dimension. If he were to tell Yun Ruoyan about this matter now, Liamo couldn't predict how she would react, so he decided to put the matter aside for now. No matter what happens, you have to remember that you're the woman I care about very much, Liamo said slowly as he hugged Yun Ruoyan. Although Liamo had always enjoyed being close to Yun Ruoyan, this was the first time he'd said something so straightforward and mushy. Yun Ruoyan's face reddened, and she burst out laughing. She buried her face in Liamo's chest, her hands slowly tightening around Liamo's waist. "Are you afraid that I'll forget that you're the slaughtering king that everyone fears?" Yun Ruoyan laughed. Liamo chuckled. "Others might be afraid of me, but not my Yen. Chapter 246. Your Highness, Slaughtering King. Yun Ruoyan lifted her head from Liamo's chest. "You didn't come all the way here just to say these few words, did you?" Liamo couldn't help but tap her on the forehead when he saw Yun Ruoyan's innocent expression. "Ouch, why did you hit me? It hurts." Yun Ruoyan clutched her forehead and glared at Liamo. "If you have something to say, hurry up and say it." I still have to go to class. You don't have to go to class. Liemo let go of Yun Ruoyan and pulled her over to a small table. He began to explain the situation in the alternate dimension to Yun Ruoyan. Before me, the Great Elder had actually accepted 2 disciples, one male and one female. However, they both died in the otherworld trials. Although I've never been to the alternate dimension, I'm well aware of its dangers. Each time, less than 1/10 of my fellow disciples make it out alive, and sometimes not even a single one. This time, for some reason, the alternate dimension opened earlier than expected, and the number of people entering has increased by 1/3. I'm afraid that it's even more dangerous than before. Liemo looked at Yun Ruoyan. Tomorrow, the elders will decide on the list of students participating in the alternate dimension. If you don't want to go, will you? Yun Ruoyan interrupted Liemo, her bright eyes looking at him. I wanted to go 3 years ago, but the first elder stopped me. This time, I have to go, but I'm going too. Yun Ruoyan interrupted Liemo once more, her tone firm. I'm going with you. That night, at the top of the Southern College's tower, Liemo, the 6 elders and the first elder's disciple, were in the midst of a meeting. You all know that our Central College has always been known as the useless college, so we can't produce any students. The 6th elder was the one speaking, his face smiling as if he didn't care about his reputation at all. 6th elder, you're far too unkind. The 3rd elder used his fat finger to point at the 6th elder and continued, if we were to rank them according to their ranks, none of the students from the other 4 academies could compare to the students from your academy. It was common knowledge that the students of the Central College, which the 6th elder represented, were the weakest in all of Kongming Academy. However, in order to ensure that the students of the Central College wouldn't be so weak when they graduated, the 6th elder had resorted to cheating to help them advance in rank. Who's the unkind one? The 6th elder wasn't willing. Who here doesn't know about our academy's situation? Isn't letting them go to the otherworld the same as sending them to their deaths? Our academy's cultivation is also low, so even if they go, they'll still be sending themselves to their deaths. The Western Academy's elder echoed. None of you are willing to send anyone. Could it be that we, the 3 courtyards, have to send all 30 people? The 2nd elder, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke up. As soon as the 2nd elder spoke, everyone shut their mouths. It could be seen that everyone was somewhat afraid of him. As the saying goes, the capable do more work. After a long while, the 6th elder said in a low voice. Old 6, what are you whispering about? If you have something to say it out loud. Let's all hear it, the 2nd elder said coldly. That's right, 6th elder. Everyone should be sharing the spots equally, but you're refusing to do so. Based on the percentage of students who survive each expedition, those who are 1 or 2 ranks higher than the others are practically negligible. In any case, they'll all be sending themselves to their deaths. That's right. In my opinion, it's better to send those with lower cultivation than those with higher cultivation, the 5th elder said. 5th elder, what do you mean by that? The 6th elder's eyes widened in shock. Are you trying to cheat? The minimum requirement for entering the otherworld was for 8th rank blade masters. Before that, any 5th rank blade master could be included in the list, and once it was made, it wouldn't be changed. After the training, the chosen students' cultivation would increase. If they still couldn't become 8th rank blade masters after the training, they would be given a spiritual pill that would forcibly increase their cultivation. This spiritual pill was only suitable for 4th rank blade masters and above. As long as one satisfied this condition, they would be able to reach 8th rank in a short period of time. However, this pill had certain side effects. If one only used it to increase 1 or 2 ranks, the side effects wouldn't be obvious, but if one used it to increase one's cultivation by more than 2 ranks, it would be like spoiling a seedling to help it grow. Once consumed, there would be no obvious increase in cultivation. In addition, his ability to draw spiritual energy into his body and use it to fight was much weaker than others. He was basically a fake 8th rank blade master, just there to make up the numbers. Ha ha. The 5th elder chuckled. 6th elder, why are you so surprised? Isn't cheating your forte? 5th elder, don't get it wrong. My cheating isn't a big deal, but it's a big deal. Cheating is a very important matter. Why not? I think 5th elder's suggestion is very good. What's good about it? If we are discovered by the guards of the Otherworld Gate, the consequences will be unthinkable. The elders began to argue with each other again. Liamo sat by the 1st elder's side, not saying a word. He was already used to such a scene. In the past, every time the gate between worlds opened, the elders would argue for a long time in order to decide on the list of students to go to the Otherworld. The students who didn't know what was going on the other hand, were all looking forward to the treasure hunt. Every time, the students from the Central College would be dissatisfied with the small number of names they received, feeling that the other 5 colleges were bullying them. All right, the 1st elder finally said. Everyone, including the 2nd elder, quietened down at this moment. Everyone's gazes were fixed on the great elder. Cheating isn't an option. The 1st elder immediately rejected the 5th elder's suggestion. If they sent someone with some cultivation, there would still be a chance of survival. But if they cheated, the person sent out would undoubtedly die. As the 1st elder of Kongming Academy, he couldn't bear to see so many innocent students go to their deaths. The 1st elder would rather send out a few students who had a chance of survival. If they managed to escape, they would surely become the strongest cultivators on the Qinyuan continent. To them, this was an opportunity. We'll need a total of 30 students this time. The Southern College will send 10, the 1st elder continued. The Northern College will send 8, and the Western and Eastern colleges will send 5 each. The 1st elder turned to the 6th elder. The Central College will send 2. What do you think? The 6th elder seemed to have something else to say, but after a moment's thought, he decided against it. Then it settled. The 1st elder stood up from his seat. I'll give you 1 day to come up with a name list and submit it to me as soon as possible. We only have a year's time for the training. Liamo will be in charge of the training in the alternate dimension, and he's also on the list to enter the alternate dimension. In the Central District, the 6th elder found Zhuo Yifeng and told him about the training in the alternate dimension. Yifeng. Although you're a new student, your cultivation is one of the best in the entire Central College. As such, I'm prepared to give you one of the 2 slots to enter the alternate dimension. Hearing this news, Zhuo Yifeng's bright eyes became even brighter because of excitement. Thank you, 6th elder, for giving me this opportunity. I won't let you down. Most of the new students had heard about the alternate dimension from the older students. Naturally, Zhuo Yifeng had heard of it as well. Those who had been chosen to enter the alternate dimension were all experts of the academy. The alternate dimension was filled with treasures, and it was a place that everyone yearned for. Anyone who managed to walk out of the alternate dimension would become an influential figure on the Qinyuan continent. It was said that the heads of the 4 empires' chambers of commerce, the Yuelu Villa's master, Dong Tiehe, and the commander of the northern barracks of the Li Kingdom, General Huang, were all experts who had come from the alternate dimension. The students of Kongming Academy were always excited when they heard this. Being able to enter the alternate dimension had become one of their dreams. Seeing Zhuo Yifeng's excited expression, the 6th elder couldn't help but say a few more words. Although there are many treasures in the alternate dimension, it's also extremely dangerous. You mustn't let your guard down. You must prioritize your life above all treasures. Yifeng understands. Thank you for your guidance, 6th elder, Zhuo Yifeng said gratefully. All right, you may go. The 6th elder waved his hand at Zhuo Yifeng, who bowed and retreated. The 6th elder looked at Zhuo Yifeng's retreating figure and couldn't help but sigh. It hadn't been easy for him to recruit a talented student who suited his tastes, and now he was about to send him off to a dangerous place. The sixth elder couldn't bear to see him go. After Zhuo Yifeng left the sixth elder's residence, he didn't return to the male dormitory. Instead, he took a detour to the cliff at the back of the mountain. Zhuo Yifeng arrived at the edge of the cliff. Seeing that it was still early, he pulled out a pheasant that he had hunted that morning from a nearby bush. Because of the cold weather, the pheasant had already been frozen stiff. Zhuo Yifeng used his right hand to pat the pheasant in his left hand, causing the stiff pheasant to soften. Afterwards, Zhuo Yifeng took the pheasant to a nearby spring and began to tidy it up. After tidying up the pheasant, he spread the seasoning he'd prepared and started to roast it. Not long after, the smell of burnt meat filled the air. At this time, a black figure silently appeared in front of Zhuo Yifeng. Zhuo Yifeng was so focused on roasting the pheasant that he didn't notice the person's arrival. Until the black figure walked over and sat down in front of him. Only then did Zhuo Yifeng raise his head in alarm. "Senior, you've come." Zhuo Yifeng had a joyful smile on his face. His beast-man eyes flickered with two flickering flames. The black figure only glanced at Zhuo Yifeng before quickly lowering his head. He casually picked up a wooden stick from the ground and threw it into the fire. He casually said, "Your reaction to danger is so low. Your punishment is to practice the wooden vine technique 100 times. Chapter 247. Yes, Senior. Zhuo Yifeng said with a smile, not the slightest bit dissatisfied with the punishment. "Senior, it'll be ready soon." Zhuo Yifeng flipped the meat over the fire, then took out some spices and sprinkled them on top of the meat. In an instant, a strange aroma filled the air. The black-clothed man couldn't help but swallow and say, "Your barbecue skills are quite good. It's a skill passed down in my family." Zhuo Yifeng replied with a smile, "I still remember when my father taught me how to barbecue when I was a child. That was what I call delicious." About half a month ago, Zhuo Yifeng caught some game and barbecued it by himself. The black-clothed man suddenly appeared and asked Zhuo Yifeng for it, so Zhuo Yifeng gave it to him. Unexpectedly, the black-clothed man became addicted to it. He made a request to Zhuo Yifeng, asking him to come here every 3 days to prepare game for him. As a reward, the black-clothed man taught him an external technique to cultivate spirit force. Under the black-clothed man's guidance, Zhuo Yifeng began to cultivate a wood attribute technique. The wooden vine technique was the first external technique the black-clothed man taught Zhuo Yifeng. "Master, here." Zhuo Yifeng handed the roasted game to the black-clothed man. "Master, last time you said you were going to teach me a second wood attribute technique. Is it starting today?" "Don't call me master." The black-clothed man took the barbecued meat from Zhuo Yifeng and said in a cold voice, "You and I are just acquaintances. I taught you my cultivation technique in exchange for your delicious food. There is no master-disciple relationship between us." "Senior, I understand," Zhuo Yifeng said in a somewhat discouraged manner. In the past half a month, Zhuo Yifeng had tried many times to get closer to the black-clothed man, but the black-clothed man always tried his best to keep his distance. For some reason, the first time Zhuo Yifeng saw this person, he felt an indescribable sense of familiarity. This person always wore a mask, and Zhuo Yifeng clearly hadn't seen his face before. This sense of familiarity was strange, but it was so strong that Zhuo Yifeng couldn't help but want to get closer to this person and hold on to him. When this man had first taught Zhuo Yifeng how to cultivate, Zhuo Yifeng had asked to become his disciple, but the man in black had decisively rejected him. Later on, Zhuo Yifeng had purposely made a few slips of the tongue to test the black-clothed man's intentions. Each time, he had been doused with cold water by the black-clothed man. This time was no exception. From the looks of it, the black-clothed man was determined to have nothing to do with him. Perhaps once the black-clothed man had his fill of roasted game, he wouldn't appear again. Zhuo Yifeng couldn't help but sigh when he thought of this. People always have to rely on themselves. Never think of grabbing someone to rely on. The man in black seemed to see through Zhuo Feng's thoughts. As he ate, he spoke slowly. Everyone in this world has their own destiny. Your destiny is to make yourself stronger. Senior. Zhuo Feng sat in front of the black-clothed man, looked at him and asked, Senior, what is your mission? Can you tell me? Don't ask what you can't ask. The black-clothed man stopped eating and stood up, looking at Zhuo Feng. Different from Zhuo Feng, the black-clothed man's eyes were dark, like a deep well without a trace of light. Even the whites of his eyes were covered with black shadows. Zhuo Feng also stood up. Today, I will teach you a second set of wood attribute external techniques. As the black-clothed man spoke, he stretched out his hand and grabbed at the air. A green gaseous substance appeared in the black-clothed man's palm. The wild vine technique requires the presence of wild vines in the surroundings, but this chaotic leaf needle technique doesn't. The black-clothed man spread out his palm in front of Zhuo Feng, and a dark green leaf appeared in his palm. Use your own perception of the wood attribute in the air to control them, and condense them into the shape you want. The black-clothed man used his two hands to control the leaf in his hand. The lone leaf rapidly changed shape and number between the black-clothed man's hands. Sometimes, it was as small as needles, densely packed together to form a spherical object. Sometimes, it was just an ordinary flat leaf. There were dozens of them in a row, and their edges were as sharp as knives. With one look, one could tell that it was very powerful. Did you see it clearly? The black-clothed man looked at Zhuo Feng and asked. Yes, I saw it clearly. Zhuo Feng nodded. The black-clothed man made a move with both hands, and the leaves in his hands flew out, hitting the huge rock in front of him. Then, with a series of cracking sounds, countless cracks appeared on the huge mountain rock, and then it collapsed and shattered into a pile of small stones. Zhuo Feng looked at the scene in front of him, dumbfounded. He couldn't help but praise, so powerful. This is only a mid-level would attribute external spiritual force cultivation method. The black-clothed man said, you must practice it together with the wood attribute internal spiritual force cultivation method I taught you before. Otherwise, with your current spiritual force cultivation, you won't be able to expand your spiritual sea. If your spiritual sea is too weak, your spiritual force won't be enough, and you won't be able to support the use of a mid-level cultivation method. I will follow Senior's teachings. Zhuo Feng cupped his hands. Alright, that's it for today. When the black-clothed man turned to leave, he added, first practice the wild vine technique 100 times, and then practice the chaotic leaf needle technique. Senior, Zhuo Feng called out to the black-clothed man from behind, I've already been chosen to participate in the otherworld trial. I'll probably be training tomorrow, so I won't be able to make barbecue for Senior for a year. I hope Senior takes care of yourself. The man in black stopped for a moment and said, you also have to take care. I hope that after a year, I will still be able to taste your craftsmanship. After saying that, the man in black walked away without stopping. I'll definitely return, Senior. I, Zhuo Feng, promise you that I'll become stronger with my own strength. Zhuo Feng looked at the black-clothed man's back, as though he were making a vow. The black-clothed man reached out a hand, waved, and disappeared behind a large boulder. Zhuo Feng let out a long breath, his gaze resolute as he looked at another boulder not far away. That boulder was covered in dense, wild vines. Zhuo Feng walked over and began practicing the wild vine technique 100 times. When the black-clothed man arrived on the other side of the cliff, he saw a black-robed man standing there. Your Highness, the black-clothed man greeted with a bow. Su Nan, there's no need for such formalities, Liamo said, turning back to Su Nan. Su Nan straightened up and removed the black cloth covering his face, revealing a resolute face and a pair of unusually bright eyes. Thank you, Your Highness, for arranging for me to meet Feng, and pass on my techniques to him, Su Nan said gratefully. It's no trouble at all. Zhuoyifeng's talent for cultivation isn't bad. With a little nurturing, he won't be any weaker than you, Li Mo praised sincerely. Su Nan couldn't help but look gratified. After a moment's thought, he said, I heard from Feng, that he's been chosen to enter the alternate dimension. Although Su Nan hadn't entered the foreign land before, he still had some understanding of the dangers there. Given Feng's current strength, I'm afraid he won't be able to return from the alternate dimension, Su Nan said worriedly. If Zhuoyifeng were in the Southern College, I could think of something, Li Mo replied. But he's in the Central College, and I can't overstep my authority. However, I'll be entering the alternate dimension as well, and I'll do my best to take care of him. Su Nan was quite relieved to have Li Mo's protection. Thank you, Your Highness, Su Nan said. I've been in contact with Feng these past few days, and I've discovered that he harbors a deep hatred for you. If one day he offends Wang Ye, I, as an incompetent father, will first apologize on his behalf. Zhuoyifeng had always viewed Li Mo as the enemy who had killed his father and clan, and his goal had always been to defeat Li Mo to avenge his father. Zhuoyifeng had initially entered the Southern College, and it was only after discovering that Zhuoyifeng was in the Southern College that the Central College was modified. From this, one could see just how deep his hatred for Li Mo ran. Su Nan, have you no intention of reuniting with Zhuoyifeng? Li Mo tilted his head slightly. Before completing my oath to the Beast King, I can't have any attachments. Su Nan's face was as resolute as ever. Besides, there'll be too many things that I can't explain to them. In order to help Empress Shuatong find her true body, a war with the Silver Dragons was bound to break out sooner or later. Su Nan's refusal to reunite with Zhuoyifeng and his sister was, in fact, an attempt to protect them. Li Mo was naturally aware of this. Don't worry, Su Nan. One day, I'll have you reunite with your father, Li Mo said slowly as he gazed at the sea of clouds. The next day, the names of all 30 students from the 5 colleges were announced. The list was pasted on a wall in the plaza, with Li Mo's name at the top, followed by Yun Ruoyan's. When the students heard the news, they all rushed to the plaza to take a look. Boss, your name isn't on the list, a slender student by Guan Tianyu's side reported. Guan Tianyu clenched his fists and looked through the list several times. Indeed, his name wasn't on it. Yun Ruoyan, Rong Yuashan, Pei Zio, Zhuoyifeng, and Zhao Gang were all on the list, but not Guan Tianyu. The Southern College has the most spots, 10, the slender student exclaimed exaggeratedly. Our Northern College has 2 fewer spots than the Southern College. Even the useless college of the Central College has 2 spots. What a waste. The list showed that apart from Zhuoyifeng, there was also a female student named Yan Hui. That female student would be able to enter one of the 3 colleges next year, and if she passed the entrance exam a year later, she would be able to graduate. If the portal hadn't opened a year earlier, Yan Hui would have escaped this calamity and become a rare elite of the Central College. Unfortunately, she was unlucky, and the portal had opened earlier than expected. The 6th elder had put in a lot of effort to include Yan Hui on the list. As for the Northern College, which required 8 spots, the 2nd elder naturally wasn't willing to send his grandson to his death. As a result, Rong Yuashan and Yi Qianing were on the list, but Guan Tianyu was nowhere to be found. Many of the students didn't understand why, and they were dissatisfied that they hadn't made it onto the list. Among them was the king of the Northern College, Guan Tianyu. NNNNN. Chapter 248. Guan Tianyu was used to taking advantage of others, and he didn't want to be taken advantage of. He didn't understand why so many new students were on the list, but he wasn't. His cultivation wasn't weak, and he hadn't entered the 3 institutions yet, so he was qualified to be on the list. Guan Tianyu's gaze landed on Yun Ruoyan's name after Li Mo's, and a vicious glint appeared in his eyes. Last time, he and Rong Yuashan had exchanged blows with Yun Ruoyan, and he knew that her cultivation wasn't weak, perhaps even higher than Rong Yueshan's. However, she was still far from his level. Even without the aid of the bracelet, Yun Ruoyan was a peak 7th-rank blade master, whereas Guan Tianyu was already an 8th-rank blade master, and he was in the midst of training with his own flying swords. Although on the surface, Guan Tianyu was only a single rank higher than Yun Ruoyan, this difference in cultivation was often enough to overwhelm her. Guan Tianyu was burning with rage, and he immediately wanted to find someone to beat the crap out of. Sister Ruoyan, your name's on the list, and it's at the very front. Lin Qingxue and Lin Qingqin pulled Yun Ruoyan into the crowd. Because she'd already known the result, Yun Ruoyan wasn't surprised at all. I've heard that there are treasures everywhere in this alternate dimension, and some of them are of extremely high quality. They're rare on the Qinyuan continent, Lin Qingxue exclaimed. I've heard that, too. Apparently, many spiritual herbs and herbs that are extinct on the Qinyuan continent are the rarest and most common in this alternate dimension. Lin Qingqin's eyes were also filled with longing. But that's all hearsay. I don't think anyone from the academy has personally ventured into this alternate dimension. The elders have all returned from this alternate dimension, and it's said that some of the instructors from the 3 institutions have also returned from that dimension. At some point, Zhong Yang had appeared by their side, and he had clearly overheard their conversation. However, when those who have gone to the other dimension return, they're all tight-lipped about the specifics of the place, but the treasures they bring back are truly peerless, giving rise to the legend that the other dimension is filled with treasures. I don't know much about the other dimension either, but this time, I'll be able to explore it for myself, Guan Ruliu explained when she saw everyone's gazes on her. That's right, I didn't expect that I, Zhong Yang, would have the opportunity to enter this alternate dimension. Zhong Yang couldn't help but laugh as he looked at his name behind Guan Ruliu's. Based on what they knew, those who entered the alternate dimension didn't have to return to the 5 colleges. Instead, they could choose to enter the 3 institutions and cultivate on their own, or they could graduate from Kongming Academy and establish themselves on the Qinyuan continent. Yun Ruoyan clearly knew more about the alternate dimension than the others, but Liemo had told her that, in order to avoid panic, the elders had requested that the dangers of the alternate dimension be kept a secret. Furthermore, in order to appease the students who had been chosen, the information that had been released was all positive. Most of the students who had died in the alternate dimension had also been kept a secret by the elders. If everyone were to know that the odds of surviving in the alternate dimension were less than 1 in 10, and that there was even a chance that the entire group would be wiped out, it would be very difficult for anyone to enter the alternate dimension again. Hey, you guys! As they conversed, a skinny student by Guan Tianyu's side called out to Yun Ruoyan's group. Didn't you hear our boss calling for you? Yun Ruoyan's group looked in the direction of the voice. Yun Ruoyan's group turned toward the source of the voice, only to see the tall and burly Guan Tianyu walking toward them. That tyrant's trying to cause trouble again. Lin Qingshue's expression was somewhat displeased. But why haven't I seen Rong Yueshan's group yet? Only then did Yun Ruoyan realize that Rong Yueshan, Pei Xiao, and Yi Qianying were indeed nowhere to be seen. I'm talking to you guys. Are you deaf or mute? The skinny student by Guan Tianyu's side had a sharp and clear voice, instantly attracting the attention of a large group of people in the plaza. As soon as the crowd saw the tyrant of the Northern College, they spontaneously made way for them, forming a circle around Yun Ruoyan and Guan Tianyu. Based on past experience, Guan Tianyu was about to teach someone a lesson. Without the crowd blocking his path, Guan Tianyu quickly walked up to Yun Ruoyan. He looked down at Yun Ruoyan condescendingly and said disdainfully, "To think that someone like you would have the right to enter this dimension." Yun Ruoyan only smiled at him. Not wanting to waste her breath on him, she turned to leave. What's wrong? Are you afraid that I'll expose you in front of so many people? Don't think that just because you're Master Mo's disciple that I won't dare do anything to you, Guan Tianyu laughed. There's no one in Kongming Academy that I'm afraid of. Someone in the crowd seemed to have caught on to Guan Tianyu's hidden meaning. I got it, too, another person added. What's he trying to expose Yun Ruoyan in front of so many people? Who cares? In any case, there's going to be a good show to watch today. Since this tyrant didn't make it onto the list, he's definitely not going to let the matter rest. Yun Ruoyan wasn't affected in the slightest by Guan Tianyu's words or the surrounding crowd's discussion. She was the senior disciple of the Southern College, and although she wouldn't normally intervene in such trivial matters, this matter concerned Master Mo's reputation, and she had no choice but to speak up. I, Guan Tianyu, never make things up. If I were lying, why wouldn't Yun Ruoyan dare to speak up? Guan Tianyu looked at Yun Ruoyan, still trying to provoke her. This was Guan Tianyu's usual tactic. If he wanted to find trouble with someone, he would first try to provoke them, and when they retaliated, he would have the perfect opportunity to teach them a lesson. This was also one of Guan Tianyu's main methods of avoiding punishment after bullying someone. Guan Tianyu. When everyone's eyes were on Yun Ruoyan, she finally spoke up. Although I'm a new student, I'm well aware of your tendency to bully others whenever you're unhappy. Yun Ruoyan clasped her hands behind her back, her posture haughty. You want to provoke me, so you're slandering Master Mo. No student of the Southern College will tolerate such behavior. Liu Mo had quite a reputation at Kongming Academy, especially among the Southern College's students. Some of the Southern College's students had been furious when they'd heard Guan Tianyu's words, and now that they heard Yun Ruoyan's words, they were even more furious. This tyrant of the Northern College sure is audacious. It's one thing for her to bully her juniors, but this time, she's slandering Master Mo. She really needs to be taught a lesson. So the slaughtering king is actually Master Mo. That's amazing. Someone actually dared to defame such a powerful person? They must be tired of living. Yun Ruoyan smiled coldly. Since you want to fight with me, I'll grant you your wish, lest you come up with any other dirty ideas. She stepped forward, ready to receive Guan Tianyu's blow. Seeing that his goal had been achieved, Guan Tianyu didn't care about what the others said. Guan Tianyu's goal was simple. He wanted to injure Yun Ruoyan so that she wouldn't be able to participate in the training. If she couldn't participate, she wouldn't be able to enter the alternate dimension, and that extra spot would be his. Chapter 249. If I'd known you'd be so straightforward, I wouldn't have wasted so much saliva on you. Guan Tianyu smiled wickedly. Come, make your move. Yun Ruoyan hated Guan Tianyu to the core, and she didn't hesitate to send a fireball flying at him. After a period of practice, Yun Ruoyan's fireball technique had become much more proficient and powerful than before. The fireball she conjured was more than twice as large as before. Yun Ruoyan stretched out her hand, and the fireball left a long trail in the air as it flew toward Guan Tianyu. Guan Tianyu's face revealed a hint of surprise, and he quickly used his ice-attuned external spiritual technique. He pushed out his hands, and green spiritual energy quickly condensed in front of him. He attempted to create an ice wall in the shortest time possible to block Yun Ruoyan's fireball. However, by the time Yun Ruoyan's fireball reached Guan Tianyu, his ice wall had only formed halfway. Half of the fireball was blocked by the ice wall, and the other half licked Guan Tianyu's lower body. Guan Tianyu's white academy uniform was instantly set ablaze by the fireball. Guan Tianyu's expression changed, and he hurriedly used one hand to condense water vapor to extinguish the flames on his robes. Ha, he's on fire. Lin Qingxue laughed gloatingly. That's what you get for spouting nonsense. Yun Ruoyan's hands remained behind her back, as if she hadn't expended any energy at all. Guan Tianyu, on the other hand, looked far more disheveled. How impressive! I saw Yun Ruoyan's fireball technique back in the cafeteria, but it wasn't this impressive. In less than a month, her fireball technique has more than doubled in power. Master Mo's disciple truly lives up to her name. This Guan Tianyu's really got himself a tough nut to crack. Guan Tianyu quickly extinguished the flames on his robes. Although he looked disheveled, he wasn't really injured. "Boss, are you all right?" The skinny student had fled as soon as the fireball had struck, and now he was running back. "Get lost, useless thing." Exasperated, Guan Tianyu shoved the scrawny student aside. The scrawny student was shorter than Guan Tianyu by more than a head, and his arms weren't even half as thick as Guan Tianyu's. The shove sent him sprawling to the ground. "I-oh!" The skinny student could not help but cry out in pain, but no one stretched out a hand to help him up. Instead, it caused a wave of laughter. What a good henchman, trying to flatter him backfired. "Ha ha ha, that's a good fall. I've long found him an eyesore." "No, I find both of them an eyesore." Everyone laughed. Even the students of the Northern College mocked him. What a good henchman, trying to flatter him. Guan Tianyu usually relied on the second elder's influence, not respecting his senior brothers and sisters at all. He didn't even care about his junior brothers and sisters, and did whatever he wanted in the Northern College. He was even more arrogant and insufferably arrogant towards students from other academies. Furthermore, this scrawny student was always acting like a tyrant by Guan Tianyu's side. "Yun Ruoyan, I didn't expect you to improve so quickly. It seems I've underestimated you." Guan Tianyu straightened his robes and raised his head. "Now it's my turn to attack, and I won't hold back." With a wave of his hand, Guan Tianyu unleashed a row of icy blades at her. There were more than 10 ice blades in the row, and they fanned out in Yun Ruoyan's direction. It was clear that Guan Tianyu was using his full strength. Each of those ice blades was exceptionally sharp, and because there were so many of them, they had a large area of effect. Although Yun Ruoyan's fireball technique was powerful, her target was only Guan Tianyu, and it wouldn't affect anyone else around her. Everyone present broke out in a cold sweat when they saw Guan Tianyu use this technique. Guan Tianyu must have been so angry that he'd lost his mind. Was he going to affect everyone around him with such a large area of effect? In the blink of an eye, the dozen or so ice blades reached Yun Ruoyan. She wasn't strong enough to melt them all with a fireball. Even if she tried to, she would only be able to melt a small portion of the ice blades, and the rest wouldn't be able to be blocked. Around Yun Ruoyan, Lin Qingchen, and quite a few other students from the Southern College who didn't have high cultivations. It wouldn't have been difficult for her to protect herself, but it would have taken a lot of effort to protect others. "Senior Sister Guan." Yun Ruoyan hurriedly glanced at Guan Ruliu, who understood and stepped forward to stand in front of Yun Ruoyan. Yun Ruoyan sent out 4 fireballs in a row, melting 4 of the ice blades. The remaining ones were already in front of the 2 of them. Suddenly, Guan Ruliu took out a vine from her waist and threw it at the ice blades in front of her. The vine grew as the wind blew, and it was as long and slender as a jade-green snake. It was like a whip with a life of its own, shattering 7 or 8 ice blades in a row. It was really amazing. It looks like the students from the Southern College aren't all that bad. In that case, I won't hold back. As Guan Tianyu spoke, he once again released a large number of ice blades. The crowd estimated that there were more than 20 of them. "Guan Tianyu!" Yun Ruoyan shouted. "If you want to deal with me, you should be aiming at me alone. What's wrong with you now?" By this time, Guan Ruliu had already begun to disperse the crowd behind her. However, there were too many people, and some who didn't know what was going on were still squeezing in to watch the show. She couldn't disperse the crowd in a short time. "Can't you tell? I'm casting a net wide to catch a big fish." Guan Tianyu looked as if he didn't care about the consequences. "Aren't you afraid of being punished by the Hall of Penitence if you hurt others?" Yun Ruoyan asked harshly. Last time, Master Rome of the Northern College said in front of everyone that anyone who hurts a fellow student will be sent to the Hall of Penitence for punishment. Guan Tianyu laughed coldly. "My ice blades will only hurt people, not kill them. As long as they don't die, I won't be in trouble. Cut the crap and take this. As soon as he finished speaking, Guantianyu pushed his palms forward, and the row of 20-odd ice blades flew toward Yunruoyan. Guan Ruliu, Zhong Yang, and the Lin sisters were all doing their best to disperse the crowd behind them. Yunruoyan was the only one blocking the ice blades, and she was forced to retreat again and again, buying time to form more fireballs. Everyone else was worried for Yunruoyan. It was impossible for her to deal with so many ice blades by herself. Yunruoyan didn't have time to think about anything else. All she could do was try her best. Just as Yunruoyan had melted a few of the ice blades and the rest were about to reach her, a wave of emerald leaves suddenly flew out of nowhere. Out of nowhere, a large number of dark green leaves suddenly flew out, and the number of those leaves was much more than the ice blades. The ice blades collided with the leaves, sending shards of ice and shards of green flying. Who's there? Guantianyu looked around. Who's the busybody? It's me. A low, masculine voice rang out from the crowd. Everyone turned toward the source of the voice, only to see a tall, burly youth about the same height as Guantianyu walk out from the crowd. This man was none other than Zhuo Feng, who had been transferred from the Southern College to the Central College. Brother Zhuo. Lin Qingxue called out happily. You've come just in time. This guy's so annoying. Why don't you and Sister Ruoyan teach him a lesson together? Zhuo Feng's cold expression softened somewhat when he saw Lin Qingxue's smiling face. When he met Yun Ruoyan's gaze, he nodded slightly. Yun Ruoyan nodded back at him. The rapport between the two of them, honed through countless life and death battles, returned in an instant. At this moment, the two of them gave each other the feeling that they had become stronger. Although their cultivation as blade masters hadn't increased by much, the fact that they had both trained in external spiritual techniques had strengthened their connection to the spiritual energy around them. As a result, their auras had changed as well. The two of them stood side by side, one on the left and one on the right. They didn't speak, but they seemed to be in perfect harmony with one another. And where did you come from? Guantianyu asked. Ever since Zhuo Feng had entered the Central College, he hadn't gone out much, so many of the older students didn't recognize him. Boss, he's Zhuo Feng, the trash of the Central College. A skinny student leaned over to Guantianyu's side, holding his bent waist. Humph. Guantianyu snorted. I was wondering who it was, but it turns out to be the trash of the Central College. It doesn't matter who I am, Guantianyu replied. Zhuo Feng looked at Guantianyu with bright eyes. What's important is that you'll pay for bullying my friend. When Guantianyu met Zhuo Feng's unusually bright eyes, he paused for a moment before scoffing, so it's a beastkin brat. Since when did Kongming Academy accept such a lowly beastkin as a student? Is there no one else on the Qinyuan continent? As soon as Guantianyu finished speaking, a large swarm of tiny, jade-green needles suddenly appeared in front of his eyes. Looking at the densely packed area, it was simply impossible to estimate their numbers. Guantianyu was someone who had undergone training in the alternate dimension, and he didn't panic at Zhuo Feng's sudden attack. He grabbed the skinny student by his side and used him as a shield. Oh, my mother! What followed was a howl like a pig being slaughtered. More than half of the densely packed flying leaf needles were fixed on the skinny student's body. However, because the skinny student was too short and Guantianyu was too tall, Guantianyu was able to use the student as a shield, but half of the needle still landed on his body. Guantianyu looked at the needle-like leaves on his arms. Beads of blood seeped out from the edges of the leaves. Although the wounds were small, there were so many of them that the beads of blood quickly dyed both his arms red. The skinny student who had been used as a shield was even more frightening. His entire back was soaked in blood. Regardless of the severity of his injuries, it was clear that he was in a terrible state. Zhuo Feng, you're really ruthless. Are you trying to kill me? Guan Tianyu's eyes burned with rage, but he didn't dare act recklessly. Zhuo Yifeng's external spiritual technique was too strange and powerful, and Guan Tianyu had never seen anything like it before. He couldn't believe that the Central College had produced such a powerful individual. Guan Tianyu could sense that Zhuo Yifeng's cultivation was lower than his, but this domineering external technique was more than enough to deal with him. What's going on here? Why are you all crowding around here instead of going to class? Rong Tianhai's voice suddenly sounded from outside the crowd. Master Rong, come quickly. Hearing Rong Tianhai's voice, Guan Tianyu immediately shouted, someone is committing murder here. Come and punish him. Chapter 250. Just as Guan Tianyu was being suppressed by Zhuo Yifeng's domineering technique, Rong Tianhai suddenly appeared. When Guan Tianyu heard Rong Tianhai's voice, he hurriedly called for help, and the other students quickly made way for him. Rong Tianhai, you've come just in time. These people injured a fellow student. Hurry up and take them to the Hall of Penitence for punishment. Guan Tianyu's gaze was venomous as he looked at Yun Ruoyan and Zhuo Yifeng. When Rong Tianhai saw Guan Tianyu and the skinny student covered in blood, he barked coldly, who did this? I've already said that anyone who harms a fellow student will be punished by the Hall of Penitence. Are you ignoring my words now? Where are the students of the Northern College? Rong Tianhai called out to the crowd, and quite a few of the Northern College's students immediately stepped forward. Take these assailants to the Hall of Penitence. Rong Tianhai ordered. Yes, Rong Tianhai. The students replied in unison, then walked toward Yun Ruoyan and Zhuo Yifeng. Seeing this, Zhuo Yifeng stepped in front of Yun Ruoyan. I was the one who injured them, and no one else has anything to do with it. Rong Tianhai looked at Guan Tianyu inquiringly. Who was the one who injured you? Guan Tianyu didn't answer immediately. Instead, he began calculating in his heart. Yun Ruoyan is Master Mo's disciple, after all. If I capture her and alarm Master Mo, it'll only make matters worse, and I won't be able to achieve my goal. Guan Tianyu's current plan was to make sure that one of the students on the list couldn't participate in the training. If they couldn't participate in the training, they wouldn't be able to participate in the expedition in a year's time. In that case, he could take their place. What he didn't want the most was to cause trouble, and he would have plenty of opportunities to teach those who had offended him a lesson in the future. The person who injured me was indeed this beastkin brat, and it has nothing to do with anyone else. Rong Tianhai nodded and gestured toward the Northern College students. Two of them stepped forward to detain Zhuo Yifeng. Wait! Yun Ruoyan stepped forward to stop him. Her tone was calm, but her eyes were cold as she looked at Rong Tianhai. As an executor of the Hall of Penitence, are you going to judge someone based on a one-sided story? In Kongming Academy, the Hall of Penitence was in charge of punishing students who had committed serious crimes, and it rarely punished students. However, once they were punished, the punishment would definitely be very severe. That was why the students were rather respectful towards the Hall of Penitence. Lin Qingxue and Lin Qingchen also stepped forward and explained, just now, Guan Tianyu not only wanted to injure someone, but he also wanted to implicate the innocent. It's all thanks to Sister Ruoyan and Brother Zhuo's intervention that more people would have been injured. However, there were some things that Lin Qingxue didn't know, such as the situation of cultivation, that the two of them couldn't find out through her. The fireball technique I used was only a low-level fire attune technique. Yun Ruoyan extended a hand, and a small ball of fire appeared in her palm. As Yun Ruoyan continued to infuse it with spiritual energy, the small ball of fire slowly turned into a small fireball, which grew larger and larger until it was the size of an infant's head. The fireball spun in Yun Ruoyan's palm, illuminating both of their faces with a fiery red light. Amazing! Zhuo Yifeng couldn't help but praise Yun Ruoyan's proficiency in controlling the fireball's size and movement. Zhuo Yifeng, who was also a spiritual cultivator, was well aware that it was much more difficult to control the elemental form of the fireball than to actually form it. Zhuo Yifeng had only recently learned a low-level wood-attune technique, chaotic flying needles. He could form them, but he couldn't control them well. Back in the plaza, Zhuo Yifeng had only wanted to use this move to intimidate Guan Tianyu, but he couldn't stop himself from unleashing it. As a result, the two of them had been injured. Fortunately, his martial arts were still shallow. According to the black-clothed senior's performance that night, this disorderly flying leaves needles technique was definitely capable of splitting mountains and splitting rocks. It wasn't as simple as just bleeding a little. Yun Ruoyan slowly clenched her fist, extinguishing the flame in her palm. She looked at Zhuo Yifeng with a smile. This time, both you and I have been chosen to enter the alternate dimension. I hope that we can still face danger together, just like before. Yun Ruoyan looked at Zhuo Yifeng with hope in her eyes. It wasn't easy to find a partner who she could trust and work well with. Even though Yun Ruoyan knew of the grudge between Zhuo Yifeng and Li Mo, she still tried to pull Zhuo Yifeng along. After all, teaming up with him in the alternate dimension was undoubtedly the best guarantee of their safety. I'm used to being alone, Zhuo Yifeng replied after a long silence. Like everyone else, Zhuo Yifeng didn't know much about the alternate dimension, and he didn't know as much about its dangers as Yun Ruoyan did. Zhuo Yifeng, listen to me, Yun Ruoyan tried to persuade him. Yun Ruoyan was still trying to convince him. Apart from the treasures that everyone says are everywhere in this alternate dimension, there's even more danger. If you come with us, you don't need to persuade me, Zhuo Yifeng interrupted her. I've already made up my mind. Yun Ruoyan wanted to continue, but she was interrupted by a familiar male voice. Li Mo had appeared outside the wooden cell, his hands behind his back. Li Mo, Yun Ruoyan stood up and quickly walked to the door of the cell. She smiled. I knew you'd come to save us. Li Mo reached his hand into the cell and smacked Yun Ruoyan on the head. Call me master. Yun Ruoyan rubbed her forehead, a little aggrieved as she glared at Li Mo. She didn't know when Li Mo had developed the habit of smacking her on the head, but Yun Ruoyan had protested more than once. Her protests, however, were clearly of no use to a certain someone. Seeing that Li Mo's expression wasn't good, Yun Ruoyan knew that this wasn't the time to lash out, and she could only obediently call him master. Open the door, Li Mo said to one of the guards beside him. The guard immediately bowed and opened the door. Yun Ruoyan walked out of the cell. Seeing that Zhuo Yifeng was still sitting on a wooden stool, she called for him to come out. Li Mo clasped his hands behind his back and turned to leave, speaking slowly as he did so. We'll begin training tonight, and we'll gather in the plaza at dusk. Anyone who's late will be disqualified. Zhuo Yifeng's fists clenched tightly by his side as he stood up and walked out of the cell. Keep up, Li Mo instructed as he strode out of the room. Yun Ruoyan and Zhuo Yifeng followed Li Mo out of the Hall of Penitence. Just as they were about to step out of the door, a figure that the three of them didn't welcome appeared. Senior Li Mo. Rong Tianhai blocked in front of Li Mo. These two students have broken the rules, and you're taking them away without even informing me. Aren't you disrespecting the Hall of Penitence a little too much? When Li Mo had come to take Yun Ruoyan and Zhuo Yifeng away, the guards in the Hall of Penitence hadn't dared to stop him. Instead, they had immediately notified Rong Tianhai, who had hurried over to stop him. Li Mo didn't want to waste time with Rong Tianhai. The expedition will begin in a year's time, and the training will begin tonight. If you keep them here, who's going to take their place? Do you want to go? Rong Tianhai didn't have the authority to know much about the expedition, but he was, after all, an administrator at Kongming Academy, and he had been there for some time. It was easy to guess that the expedition wasn't a good place to go, so he chose to remain silent. If you don't want to, then don't waste everyone's time here. As Li Mo spoke, he circled around Rong Tianhai and continued on his way, treating Rong Tianhai as if he were invisible. Rong Tianhai looked at Li Mo's back and thought angrily, "What are you so proud of? If you ever fall into the hands of the Hall of Penitence again, I won't show you any mercy." Chapter 251. As Rong Tianhai thought to himself, he looked toward the western side of the Hall of Penitence. There was a naturally formed valley there, and it was surrounded by a natural formation. Anyone who violated the heavenly punishment would have to go there to be punished. The last time the heavenly punishment formation had been activated was to punish Li Mo for opening the all-seeing mirror without permission. For some reason, Rong Tianhai had a feeling that Li Mo would be punished again sooner or later. As the three of them walked out of the Hall of Penitence, Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but look back. She hadn't taken a good look when she first entered, but now, she saw a plaque hanging above the entrance. The words "Hall of Penitence" were written on the plaque. Although the words were strong and forceful, there wasn't anything particularly special about it. What caught her attention, however, was what seemed to be a sculpture behind the plaque, beneath the eaves of the roof. Because the sculpture was hidden in the shadows, it didn't attract much attention. However, Yun Ruoyan's gaze was drawn to it. As she walked forward, she infused her eyes with spiritual energy, trying to improve her vision. She could finally see the sculpture clearly. It was a four-legged serpentine creature covered in scales, but it was missing its head. Because it was missing its head, Yun Ruoyan couldn't tell whether it was a dragon or some other kind of monster, but she felt that it was a little strange. "Hey!" Yun Ruoyan turned back to look, but Li Mo suddenly stopped in front of her, and she bumped into his back. Yun Ruoyan turned back to look up at him, and Li Mo turned back to look down at her. Their gazes met, and Yun Ruoyan subconsciously clutched her forehead. "If you were to knock me now, I'd definitely fall out with you." "Miss Yun," Shui Feng said from the side. "I'll go back and make some preparations, then head straight to the plaza." Before Yun Ruoyan could respond, Shui Feng had already left for the Central College. Yun Ruoyan looked at Shui Feng's back and couldn't help but sigh. Was there really no way to resolve the enmity between him and Li Mo? A few questions about Li Mo that Yun Ruoyan had deliberately avoided popped up in her mind. There had to be a reason why Li Mo, as the Beast King's son, had slaughtered so many Beast Kin. If Li Mo could find a way to resolve the grudge between Shui Feng and Li Mo didn't elaborate, and it wasn't appropriate for her to press the matter. Just as Yun Ruoyan was deep in thought, she felt a sudden pain in her forehead. "Li Mo." Yun Ruoyan clutched her forehead, about to explode. "I heard you volunteered to enter the Hall of Penitence." Li Mo's tone was serious. "So what if I did?" Yun Ruoyan rubbed her forehead, as if she hadn't done anything wrong. Yun Ruoyan's fearless demeanor gave Li Mo a headache. He frowned. "Do you know where the Hall of Penitence is?" As she walked past Li Mo, she deliberately nudged him with her elbow. "Don't be so willful in the future," Li Mo warned from behind. "I can't promise that," Yun Ruoyan replied without turning her head. "I can't disregard my friends just to protect myself. If you wanted to help your friends, you could have come to me. There's no need to put yourself in the same position." Li Mo's heart was filled with anger. No one knew better than him what kind of place the Hall of Penitence was. If not for him, and if not for the fact that the training was just around the corner, how could Yun Ruoyan have emerged unscathed from the Hall of Penitence? It was a place that even Li Mo would lose a layer of his skin if he entered. "What if you weren't there?" Yun Ruoyan asked. "What if I couldn't find you in time? What if this person isn't someone you're willing to help?" Li Mo looked at the stubborn woman in front of him, his heart a little sullen. Why couldn't she just be obedient all the time? Whenever she wasn't obedient, Li Mo almost went crazy. "So you were afraid that I wouldn't be willing to help Shui Feng, so you accompanied him to the Hall of Penitence." Li Mo's eyes darkened even more. Yun Ruoyan finally stopped, not knowing what to say. Yen, do you think I'm so narrow-minded? Of course, Yun Ruoyan didn't think that Liu Mo was a narrow-minded person, but she cared too much about Zhuo Feng to take the risk. Yen, you're sure that I care about you, so you're using yourself to provoke me. As soon as Liu Mo received news that Yun Ruoyan had been brought to the Hall of Penitence, he had immediately flown over to save her. The entire process had taken less than 5 minutes. Liu Mo smiled bitterly. This girl was determined to get him. At that moment, Liu Mo suddenly understood why his mother, Empress Xuetong, had forbidden him from lust. Lust was a weakness, and once it was grasped, it was an extremely dangerous thing to do. Wei Hai's kidnapping of Yun Ruoyan was the best example. That time, it was an outsider who'd taken advantage of his weakness, but this time, Yun Ruoyan had personally come to do so to save another man. No matter how well-mannered Liu Mo was, he couldn't help but feel angry. Yun Ruoyan knew that she was in the wrong, but she didn't regret her actions. If she were to encounter such a situation again, she would do the same thing. All right, go back and prepare. Don't be late for the evening gathering, Liu Mo said when Yun Ruoyan didn't respond. Seeing that Yun Ruoyan wasn't responding, Liu Mo began flying toward the southern tower. Hey! By the time Yun Ruoyan made a sound, Liu Mo had already flown far away. He's really angry now. As Yun Ruoyan watched Liu Mo fly further and further away, she couldn't help but feel vexed. Sister Ruoyan, are you alright? Yun Ruoyan didn't walk far from the female dormitory before she ran into the Lin sisters. The two of them tugged at Yun Ruoyan's sleeves and examined her from head to toe, as if afraid that she might be missing a piece of flesh. As it turned out, after Yun Ruoyan and Zhuo Feng had been taken away, the two sisters had heard many frightening stories about the Hall of Penitence. They said that the most common punishment for students there was the crippling of their cultivation, or even the breaking of their fingers and hands. The two sisters had been so frightened that they immediately sought out Liu Mo for help. I'm fine. Yun Ruoyan hurriedly replied. Where's Brother Zhuo and Master Mo? Why aren't they with you? Zhuo Feng has returned to the Central College, and Liu Mo has returned to the Southern College. As Yun Ruoyan spoke, she pulled the two sisters toward a small path by the cliff. Yun Ruoyan didn't know how long this training would take, and she had a few things to tell her sisters. Within the Northern College's high tower, 8 students, including Rong Wuxian, Pei Zio, and Yi Qianying, were being lectured by the second elder. The second elder only told them to pay attention to their own safety, and that survival was their top priority. Because he couldn't make it clear, some of his words were a little vague. The 8 students found it strange that the usually stern, cold, and taciturn second elder had suddenly become so wishy-washy. Pei Zio, the second elder called out. I'm here. Pei Zio stepped forward to receive his instructions. The second elder extended his hand and handed a flute-like object to Pei Zio. Pei Zio's eyes lit up. This flute-like object was the family heirloom, the spear that had been taken away from him when he entered the Northern College. Pei Zio took the cloud-piercing spear and bowed to the second elder in excitement before retreating. The second elder returned the spiritual weapons to the students one by one, then sent them back to prepare for the upcoming training. Just as Pei Zio and the others left, Rong Tianhai brought Guan Tianyu to the Northern Tower to seek an audience with the second elder. Grandfather. Guan Tianyu knelt down as soon as he saw the second elder. Tianyu, what are you doing? The second elder asked. If you have something to say, get up first. I'm not getting up. Guan Tianyu remained kneeling stubbornly. Grandfather, if you don't agree to let me participate in the training and participate in the expedition in a year's time, I won't get up. Nonsense, the second elder roared. The slots have already been decided, so what are you doing? I don't care. My cultivation and talent aren't inferior to Yun Ruoyan's at all, so why can't I go? Guan Tianyu asked. I'm your grandson, so why are you giving this opportunity to others but not me? There's no why. If I say you can't go, then you can't go. Get down. The second elder roared. Tian Hai, drag him down and keep an eye on him until everyone else leaves. Chapter 252. As it turned out, while Guan Tianyu and Yun Ruoyan were dueling in the plaza, Zhong Yang had been helping to evacuate the students. One of Guan Tianyu's ice blades had coincidentally struck Zhong Yang's back. As soon as the blade entered his flesh, it didn't leave a large wound, nor did it cause any excruciating pain. At first, Zhong Yang didn't think much of the injury, so he didn't pay it much heed. However, 2 to 4 hours later, the place where he was stabbed by the ice blade became abnormally cold. Cold air seeped into Zhong Yang's body through the wound, causing him to shiver. Suddenly, Zhong Yang couldn't even get out of bed. Guan Rulia reported the situation to Li Mo in detail. Of the 30 spots, only 29 were left. There was still one more spot to go. Li Mo immediately sent a messenger to explain the situation to the elders and had them discuss how to allocate another slot for the Dragon King. Not long after, the first, second, and fifth elders arrived. As for the other 3 elders, one pretended to be deaf and mute, while the other pretended to be in seclusion. As the 3 elders discussed quietly on the dais in front of the plaza, Li Mo stood by the side, waiting for the results. We're still missing one slot, so let's have one of our 3 colleges take it, the first elder proposed. The fifth elder lowered his head and didn't reply. At this moment, he felt some regret. How could he have been so obedient? In the future, he would have to learn to be more tactful like the other 3 elders. Zhong Yang is from the Southern College, and since he can't go, we'll have to send someone from the Southern College to take his place, the second elder proposed. Second elder, Li Mo responded coolly. Zhong Yang is from the Southern College, but he was injured by Guan Tianyu from the Northern College. Shouldn't the Northern College be held responsible? I'm aware of that, the second elder replied nonchalantly. The second elder said indifferently, 2 people from the South Courtyard were also injured, and one of them is now bedridden. Aren't Shui Feng and Yun Ruoyan still standing there? Since it's a duel, it's one thing if you're not as skilled as the other, but why are you talking about taking responsibility? The second elder was famous for being unreasonable, and even Li Mo couldn't reason with him. It seemed that the Southern College would have to send someone to take his place. But at this moment, a figure walked into the square. He passed through the square and headed straight for the high platform. This person was none other than the person who had injured Zhong Yang, Guan Tianyu. He had originally been grounded in the Northern College, but he had inadvertently overheard the Northern College students talking about Zhong Yang's injury and the selection of another student to replace him. How could Guan Tianyu let go of such an opportunity? He immediately found a way to escape and ran all the way here. He excitedly walked towards the students below, and was quickly surrounded by the other 8 students of the Northern College. Senior Guan, you're too kind. From now on, we'll have to rely on each other. Rong Yuashan smiled. Of course. I'll be sure to take care of all of you. Guan Tianyu laughed heartily. He was in a very good mood, having gotten what he wanted. However, when he turned around, he met Yun Ruoyan's gaze. Her gaze was cold and mocking, as if he'd done something utterly ridiculous. Yun Ruoyan's gaze only glanced at him once, but Guan Tianyu was infuriated. If not for the fact that there were still a few elders on the platform, he would have exploded on the spot. Up on the platform, the second elder was furious, but there was nothing he could do about it. His own grandson was desperately trying to get involved in this mess. In the end, all of the second elder's anger turned into helplessness. He sat down on his chair and said, First elder, fifth elder, are you trying to sever my bloodline? Second elder, I think you should be more optimistic, the fifth elder consoled. The fifth elder comforted him. Although the trial was extremely dangerous, it's not as if there were no survivors. Those who returned from the alternate dimension, including you and me, are all influential figures on the Qinyuan continent. Your grandson isn't one to settle down, and he won't rest until you let him go. The second elder didn't respond to the fifth elder's words. Moreover, Master Mo is the one leading the expedition this time. If he's willing to take care of you, it'll be much safer. The fifth elder glanced at Li Mo. The second elder couldn't help but look at Li Mo, but he couldn't bring himself to ask for his help. Li Mo will do his best to take care of every student, Li Mo replied coolly. Li Mo said coolly, then cupped his fists at the first elder. Now that everyone's here, would you like to speak, elders? The first elder waved his hand. It's getting late. Let's begin the training. Li Mo cupped his fists once more and bowed to the three elders, then gestured to Shui Yun, Mo Yun, and the other senior students. The four of them stepped forward and set up a teleportation array. This time, we'll be entering a mid-grade alternate dimension. You may now enter, Li Mo announced. Guan Tianyu was the first to step into the trial. Rong Yuashan, Yi Qianing, Pei Zio, and the rest of the Northern College's students followed closely behind. Yun Ruoyan and the others didn't rush. Only after the students from the other colleges had entered did Yun Ruoyan enter the trial with the Southern College's students, with Li Mo right behind her. Ever since they'd entered the plaza, Li Mo had intentionally avoided making eye contact with Yun Ruoyan. In a fit of pique, Yun Ruoyan ignored Li Mo as well. Although the two of them entered the teleportation array one after the other, they didn't communicate with each other. They'd thought that with Li Mo around, there wouldn't be a need for a map, but Li Mo's next words completely shattered that naive notion. The reason why the training was rushed and didn't give you any time to prepare is because the trip to the alternate dimension in a year's time is also very rushed, Li Mo explained. Although we know that the portal will open in a year's time, we don't know exactly which day or time it will take place. Perhaps it'll open in the evening, or in the middle of the night, when you're sleeping soundly. In that case, you'll have to enter the alternate dimension as quickly as possible. Li Mo's inky gaze swept across the crowd before he continued, I'm also completely unfamiliar with the alternate dimension, and from what the elders have described, it's different. From this, we can deduce that the alternate dimension we enter is different every time. As such, we must have the ability to deal with unfamiliar environments. This time, we'll treat this alternate dimension as a training ground. The students nodded in agreement. Yun Ruoyan looked at Li Mo. For the first time, she felt that he wasn't a prince, but an instructor at Kongming Academy. Also, this trial will be completely different from the one you fought for when you first entered the academy, Li Mo continued sternly. Last time, when you were fighting for a place in the academy, no one was there to stop you from fighting each other. However, this trial is primarily to temper your abilities, and there's no need for you to fight each other. Tempering oneself, improving one's cultivation, obtaining useful spirit medicines, spirit grasses, magic beast cores, and relying on one's own strength to survive is the ultimate goal of this trial. Li Mo then began to divide the students into 10 groups of 3, and each group would head off in a different direction. After 7 days, they would return to the academy. What surprised Yun Ruoyan was that Li Mo had actually put her, Shui Feng, and Li Mo in the same group. Yun Ruoyan wasn't surprised that Li Mo would be in the same group as Li Mo, but she was very surprised that Shui Feng would be in the same group as him. The irreconcilable enmity between the two of them made them seem like natural enemies. Shui Feng had even tried to kill Li Mo before, but his attack had been deflected by Li Mo's barrier of spiritual energy. Even so, according to Yun Ruoyan's understanding of Li Mo, he wouldn't easily let off anyone who had tried to kill him. In Yun Ruoyan's opinion, Li Mo was already giving Shui Feng face by not punishing him. Li Mo wouldn't use this opportunity to deal with Shui Feng, would he? For some reason, Yun Ruoyan suddenly had this thought, but almost as soon as it appeared, she rejected it. With Li Mo's abilities, dealing with Zhuari Feng would be far too easy. In that case, was Li Mo really taking care of Zhuari Feng? That should be the case. What she saw gave her quite a shock. On the ground beneath the treehouse, there were at least a dozen beasts lying on the ground. Each of these beasts was enormous, at least 4 or 5 times the size of the beasts on the Qinyuan continent. Although they were lying on top of each other, there was no sign of blood or intestines, and Yun Ruoyan couldn't tell whether they were dead or alive. Yen, you're awake. Li Mo's voice came from the side. Yun Ruoyan looked toward the direction of his voice and saw him perched on the branch of a nearby tree. Li Mo, what's going on down there? Yun Ruoyan asked curiously. Are these beasts dead or alive? Li Mo didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stepped into the air, and a green light shone from his body as he extended a hand toward Yun Ruoyan. Yun Ruoyan looked back at the treehouse. Everyone inside was still sleeping soundly, and even the usually alert Zhuari Feng was abnormally fast asleep. Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but feel suspicious. Yun Ruoyan handed her hand to Li Mo, and in the blink of an eye, Li Mo brought her to the ground. Yun Ruoyan bent down to examine the beasts on the ground, then turned to Li Mo. They're all alive. What's going on? Yun Ruoyan's suspicions deepened as she thought of the other students sleeping soundly in the treehouse. Suddenly, she recalled the low, distant cry she'd heard the night before, when she'd been in Li Mo's arms. Could it have been that cry? Before Yun Ruoyan could ask, Li Mo explained, it's the soul-stealing bird. Soul-stealing bird. This was the first time Yun Ruoyan had heard of such a name. She thought back to some of the fragmented records of magical beasts she had read before, and vaguely recalled a section on the records called the Extinct Records. The Extinct Records were records of magical beasts that had gone extinct on the Qinyuan continent, and the soul-stealing bird seemed to be one of them. However, Yun Ruoyan didn't have a clear picture of what the soul-stealing bird was. When Li Mo saw the confusion on Yun Ruoyan's face, he explained, when a soul-stealing bird reaches adulthood, it can kill invisibly with its chirping, but the one from last night was clearly still a fledgling, so it could only hypnotize its victim. Oh, so they were all hypnotized, no wonder. No wonder they were all so soundly asleep. Then what's with these beasts? Yun Ruoyan asked. The wild beasts on the ground were just ordinary beasts, not magic beasts. Even if there were 2 or 3 magic beasts in the middle, their killing power was extremely weak. From this, it could be seen that they were at the edge of the forest, while the terrifying magic beasts were in the depths. Last night, I heard the sound of beasts roaring in the depths of the forest. I don't know what's going on, Li Mo replied. We can go take a look. But before that, let's capture this soul-stealing bird first. Li Mo told Yun Ruoyan that soul-stealing birds like to eat all sorts of strange flowers and plants, especially bewitching flowers. Presumably, it had been attracted by the bewitching flowers from last night. By the time they finished their conversation, the sky was already bright, but no one in the hut had moved. Li Mo, on the other hand, looked delighted. Although this soul-stealing bird is still a fledgling, it's not weak at all. He struck the head of one of the smaller beasts with his spiritual energy. The wild beast suffered a blow, and its eyes suddenly opened, then slowly closed again. It was as dead as could be. Li Mo dragged the dead beast to one side. This one should be enough to fill everyone's stomachs. Li Mo glanced at Yun Ruoyan. Li Mo was in a semi-inebriated state, and everything he ate depended on his mood. Yun Ruoyan, on the other hand, was a voracious eater. Clearly, Li Mo had killed this beast for her. By then, the sky was even brighter, and sunlight shone into the forest through the gaps between the leaves. All the beasts that came into contact with the sunlight awoke. They crawled up and looked around in confusion. Yunruoyan and Liemo were just standing to the side, but they didn't panic when they saw them, treating them as mere weaklings. The wild beasts shifted their confused gazes away from the two of them, and continued to move forward with their thick limbs and huge bodies. In the shadows, where the sunlight didn't reach, there were still a few beasts sleeping soundly. Usually, beasts that are hypnotized by a soul-stealing bird will automatically wake up after 12 hours, but the one last night was clearly much more powerful than the average one. From the looks of it, unless there's a strong light, it'll probably sleep for 2 days and 2 nights, Liemo commented. NNNNN. Because she was already prepared, Yunruoyan wasn't bewitched this time. However, she felt Zhuori Feng close his eyes and take a deep breath. At first, Yunruoyan was worried that Zhuori Feng would be bewitched by the fragrance of the flowers. She wanted to warn him, but when Zhuori Feng opened his eyes after a deep breath, Yunruoyan saw that his eyes were bright and clear, without the slightest hint of bewitchment. "What did you smell just now?" "I smelled the fragrance of a leafless flower," Zhuori Feng replied. "When I was young, Mother planted a patch of it in our backyard. It's a fiery red color, and it smells faintly fragrant." Zhuori Feng closed his eyes and took another deep breath. "Shoo, quiet," Liemo suddenly called out. Then, he reached out and pulled Yunruoyan to hide in the bushes at the side. Yunruoyan tugged on Zhuori Feng's sleeve, and the three of them squatted together in the bush. Just as the three of them hid, loud footsteps could be heard from afar. At the same time, the ground began to tremble. The three of them simultaneously felt a powerful aura approaching from afar, and it was rushing towards them at an extremely fast speed. Liemo, Yunruoyan, and Yunruoyan all held their breaths and retracted their auras. Bang! 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 As the tremors grew closer, the aura grew stronger and stronger, giving Yunruoyan the feeling that it was even stronger than the average high-rank magical beast on the Qinyuan continent. A high-rank magical beast was equivalent to a 7th rank or 8th rank blade master, and this aura was clearly beyond that. Yunruoyan looked toward Liemo, who stared intently in the direction of the tremors. Suddenly, there was a cracking sound, and several large trees in the vicinity of the flower bed had been knocked down. Then, a mountainous beast that looked like a wild boar charged out of the dense forest. Between the brows of the boar's head was a ball of fiery red fur. It was a fiery hog. Yunruoyan had never seen such a large, mutated fiery hog before. The largest magical beast she had seen in the imperial family's secret territory was the saber-toothed tiger, but this inferno hog was more than twice the size of the saber-toothed tiger. Yunruoyan's heart was filled with shock. She silently calculated in her heart what her chances of victory would be if the three of them were to fight against this mutated fire hog, but she saw that the fire hog had already pounced into the flower bed. The moment the fiery hog charged into the flower bed, the colorful bewitching flowers retracted their flowers and leaves, quickly burying themselves into the soil. In an instant, the large flower bed had become a patch of bare ground. With a loud rumbling sound, a cloud of dust rose from the white ground. It was the raging flame hog that had pounced in. This fiery hog likes to eat rotting meat. It must have been bewitched by the bewitching flowers, Liemo murmured. The soul-stealing bird narrowly dodged the attack, but a few of its feathers were shaved off by the rattan. Following that, behind the thick vine, a huge flower with multicolored petals drilled out. The brood mother. Qiuqiu and Liemo cried out simultaneously. Even without Liemo and Qiuqiu's explanation, Yunruoyan could tell that the brood mother was the leader of the bewitching flowers. The soul-stealing bird had destroyed 6 or 7 bewitching flowers in a row, and the leader was finally going to get angry. Every bird that wants to mature has to eat a seed from the brood mother, Liemo explained. I've wanted to tame an adult soul-stealing bird many times, and this time, I've finally gotten my chance. The vines of the bewitching mother flower continued to chase after the soul-stealing bird. Although it looked thick and clumsy, its movements were abnormally fast. Coupled with the pincer attacks of the other soul-stealing vines, the soul-stealing bird began to panic. Stay here and protect yourself, Liemo said as he dashed toward the flower bed. At the same time, a green sword aura appeared beneath Liemo's feet, and he flew into the midst of the vines. Liemo, be careful. When Yunruoyan saw how many vines Liemo was entangled in, she couldn't help but cry out. Liemo used the fingers of his right hand as a sword, and a dazzling white spiritual energy shimmered at his fingertips. He swung his right hand, chopping off the vines that were attacking him as if he were chopping vegetables. Then, he cast a fireball with his left hand and turned the vines that he had cut into ashes in midair. Without a pincer attack, the soul-stealing bird began to fight with the brood mother, its long, sharp beak pecking at the vines whenever an opportunity presented itself. The vines secreted a corrosive green liquid, but it had no effect on the soul-stealing bird's long, hard beak. While the soul-stealing bird and bewitching flower were engaged in battle, Liemo had slaughtered his way to the bewitching mother flower. Yunruoyan saw Liemo stretch out his hands toward the center of the broodmother's flower. White spiritual energy seeped out of his palms, forming a white, cylindrical whirlwind that burrowed into the broodmother's flower. At the same time, the vines of the broodmother sensed danger and quickly retreated toward Liemo's back. At the same time, the broodmother's petals shrank back into the soil. Liemo turned around and used a fireball technique with one hand, sending a large fireball hurtling toward the vines. At the same time, his other hand continued to use the whirlwind to plunder the broodmother's flower seeds. Yunruoyan's jaw dropped. She'd seen Liemo use a spiritual whirlwind before, and she'd also seen him use a fireball technique, but this was the first time she'd seen him use both at the same time. It was rare for most people to be able to use even one type of elemental spiritual energy, but Liemo was able to use both at the same time. As Liemo continued to use fireballs to keep the vines at bay, he increased the strength of his whirlwind to plunder the broodmother's flower seeds. Just as Yunruoyan was in shock, Liemo slowly plucked out a multicolored pearl from the broodmother's flower and held it tightly in his hand. In an instant, both the broodmother and its vines withered, and the withering spread rapidly from the broodmother. In no time at all, the large flower bed had withered into a wasteland. Liemo slowly raised the colorful flower seed in his hand toward the bird in the air. "Submit to me, and the seed is yours," Liemo shouted at the broodmother. The broodmother's blood-red eyes seemed to turn even redder. With a shrill caw, it charged toward Liemo. Liemo directed the sword beneath his feet to dodge the attack. That caw made Yunruoyan feel as if a needle of ice had pierced into her brain. She felt a sharp pain, and her brain felt as if it had been filled with ice water, causing her to tremble violently. Then, his slightly muddled mind instantly became extremely clear. "Arg!" Shui Feng, who had also been affected by the broodmother's caw, cried out in pain and woke up with a frown. He flipped over and stood up, but Yunruoyan pressed him down. "Don't move. Look over there," Yunruoyan said, pointing to the sky. Shui Feng looked up, only to see Liemo facing off against the giant broodmother. The broodmother knew that its caw would have no effect on Liemo, so it chose to use a caw that would damage his brain and clear his mind. This time, it wasn't Liemo who was injured, but rather Shui Feng and Yunruoyan. The two of them desperately covered their ears to prevent the sound from piercing their brains. In midair, Liemo flew toward the baby soul-stealing bird, facing the sound waves head-on. When the young bird saw this, it couldn't help but jump in fright, and its cries came to an abrupt halt. In the blink of an eye, Liemo arrived in front of the broodmother and mounted its back. At first, the broodmother struggled violently, but Liemo would occasionally strike its eyes with spiritual energy. At first, the broodmother's eyes were as red as blood, but they slowly lost their color and turned brown. The broodmother's struggling finally slowed, and it slowly landed on the ground. Liamo jumped off the broodmother's back, and Yunruoyan ran over excitedly. It's done. Liamo smiled at Yunruoyan. Yunruoyan smiled like a blossoming flower as she reached out to stroke the broodmother's head. The broodmother dodged, but it suddenly let out a caw, causing both Yunruoyan and Zhuorifeng to cry out in pain. The two of them clutched their heads for a long time before the pain and coldness finally subsided. This bird's amazing. Yunruoyan frowned slightly, but she didn't dare to stroke it again. Take this. Liamo handed the bewitching broodmother seed to Yunruoyan. Yunruoyan looked at the seed, which was round and emitted a colorful glow. It was very cute, and she reached out to take it. If you make a bewitching potion with this, even Liamo might fall unconscious, Chocho exclaimed in Yunruoyan's mind. Feed the seed to the soul-stealing bird, Liamo instructed. It'll be closer to you in the future. All right. Yunruoyan turned to the broodmother. As soon as it saw the seed in Yunruoyan's hand, its feathers trembled in excitement. It opened its beak slightly, and it let out a series of cawing noises, as if it were whispering to one another, or as if it were a child begging for food. In the future, be good and don't make such frightening sounds. Yunruoyan extended her hand, and the broodmother obediently placed its head under her palm. Yunruoyan patted its head lightly, and the broodmother squinted its eyes fawningly. All right, here you go. Yunruoyan placed the bewitching flower seed by the soul-stealing bird's beak. The broodmother eagerly opened its mouth and sucked Yunruoyan's entire arm into its mouth. Ruoyan. Zhuorifeng, who had been standing behind Yunruoyan, hurriedly tried to pull her back, but Liamo blocked him. Yunruoyan's arm was in the broodmother's mouth, but she didn't feel any pain. Instead, she felt the broodmother's soft tongue curl around her arm, tickling her. She loosened her grip, and the broodmother's soft tongue swallowed the seed. After swallowing the seed, the broodmother immediately let go of Yunruoyan's arm, raised its head, and was about to caw. Yunruoyan covered her ears in fright, but the broodmother didn't make a sound. Instead, it leapt off the ground with both feet and soared into the sky. Yunruoyan looked up to see that the broodmother had broken through a corner of the tree's canopy that covered half the sky. Blinding sunlight shone in, forming a colorful pillar of light. Liamo, Yunruoyan murmured, will it come back? Chapter 257. After eating the bewitching flower seeds, Yunruoyan couldn't help but worry that it wouldn't return. Liamo, will it come back? Yunruoyan asked Liamo. Before Liamo could respond, a clear, melodious chirp came from the sky. Yunruoyan raised her head and saw a palm-sized shadow flying closer and closer to the multicolored pillar of light. The shadow stopped not far from Yunruoyan. It was a small, adorable bird with reddish-brown eyes, a long, pointed beak, and silver-white feathers. What is it? Yunruoyan stared at Liamo in disbelief. It's the soul-stealing bird, Liamo replied. Once a soul-stealing bird reaches adulthood, it can take on two forms. One is larger, and it's more suited for combat. How adorable! Yunruoyan couldn't help reaching out to the palm-sized soul-stealing bird. The soul-stealing bird obediently perched on Yunruoyan's palm. Is it your magical beast now? As she played with the soul-stealing bird, she turned to Liamo and asked, why don't I see you forming a contract with it? It's not qualified to form a contract with me, and it's only temporarily under my command. Liamo smiled at her. You fed it the seed of the bewitching broodmother flower to help it mature, and now it recognizes you as its half-master. As if in response to Liamo's words, the soul-stealing bird cackled twice. Mistress, Chocho called out. It doesn't like you calling it a soul-stealing bird, so it wants you to give it a name. Chocho called out in Yunruoyan's mind. Yunruoyan looked at the bird in her palm and smiled. You want me to give you a name? The soul-stealing bird chirped twice in Yunruoyan's palm. All right. Yunruoyan thought for a moment, then glanced at Liemo and smiled. I'll call you Mo, all right? No. Liemo frowned. Cluck, cluck, cluck. The soul-stealing bird was very fond of this name, and it flew around Yunruoyan excitedly. From now on, you'll be called Little Murphy. Little Murphy, hee hee. The girl's bell-like laughter echoed through the forest. Liemo shook his head and sighed, a bitter smile on his lips. Yen Er's getting bolder and bolder. I'm afraid she'll one day climb all over my head. Zhuoyifeng stood silently to the side, watching the girl play with the bird. He also looked at the slaughtering king, who had a deep grudge against him and only knew a little about him from the mouths of others. Ever since he was young, he had always imagined the slaughtering king to be a demon who killed without batting an eyelid. In Zhuoyifeng's childhood nightmares, Liemo would chop off the heads of his tribesmen one by one with a blood-stained blade, then approach him with a sinister smile. Every time Zhuoyifeng awoke from those nightmares, he would be drenched in sweat. But at this moment, the murderous demon in Zhuoyifeng's mind, the one who had always been Zhuoyifeng's nightmare, was smiling helplessly at a young girl. Zhuoyifeng couldn't help feeling a little dazed. Zhuoyifeng, what are you daydreaming about? Yunruoyan's voice suddenly interrupted Zhuoyifeng's train of thought. Where are we going next? Zhuoyifeng asked, startled. First, let's go get some bewitching flower seeds. Yunruoyan began walking toward the flower bed where the bewitching flowers had once grown. Although the bewitching flowers had all withered, their seeds were still in the soil, and the three of them quickly collected quite a few seeds. Mo dug around in the soil, eating to its heart's content. Yunruoyan had heard from Chocho that every time Mo ate a bewitching flower seed, the power of its voice would increase by a fraction. Yunruoyan had experienced this firsthand. As she watched Mo eat its seeds, she couldn't help but feel a little curious. She asked Chocho how strong it would become if it continued eating. Chocho told her that once the soul-stealing bird matured, the bewitching flower seeds would no longer have any effect on it, and Mo was only eating them out of greed. As soon as Chocho finished speaking, Yunruoyan heard Liemo stop Mo don't be so ruthless. Liemo turned to Yunruoyan. Yen you're almost done with your collection. Leave some seeds for the bewitching flower. Yunruoyan saw that they had collected about 15 seeds, which, according to Chocho, could be used to make quite a few high-grade bewitching pills. She nodded in agreement. Where are we going now? Yunruoyan asked Liemo the same question Zhuoyifeng had asked her. As Yunruoyan spoke, a rumbling sound came from her stomach. Liemo and Zhuoyifeng both turned to look at her. Yunruoyan was already used to it, and she didn't feel embarrassed at all. She turned to Zhuoyifeng. Let's get something to eat first. The three of them found a place with water. Zhuoyifeng started a fire, took out some fresh beast meat, and smeared it with special spices. Liemo, on the other hand, took out a small bottle of wine and sat by the side, sipping from it. Over the fire, the bright red meat slowly turned brown, and the aroma of the meat mixed with the spices grew stronger and stronger. It smells so good. Yunruoyan couldn't help leaning closer to Zhuoyifeng. This aroma is different from before. Zhuoyifeng, not only has your cultivation improved, but your barbecuing skills have improved as well. During this period of time, Zhuoyifeng had spent a great deal of time and effort on barbecuing in order to capture the stomach of the black-clothed man who had taught him. The spices he was currently using had been developed not long ago. The corners of Zhuoyifeng's mouth curled into a smile, then he continued to turn the skewers in his hands to ensure that every part of the meat was evenly heated. This way, the meat would be crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. Liemo, here. Yun Ruoyan handed the first piece of meat that Zhuo Feng had roasted to Liemo, somewhat fawningly. Liemo had made her half a master of Mo, and it was only right for her to reciprocate his kindness. As a result, she had no choice but to do so. Liemo's eyes were drooping as he drank his wine, but he didn't take it. It's really good. Try it, it's not any worse than the fish you roasted, Yun Ruoyan commented. Liemo glanced sideways at Yun Ruoyan, who continued to smile fawningly. Liemo stretched out 2 fingers, using spiritual energy as a knife, and sliced off a piece of meat from Yun Ruoyan's hand. He pinched it between his fingers and placed it in his mouth, but he only took a small bite. How is it? Yun Ruoyan asked expectantly, as if she were the one who had roasted the meat. Liemo swallowed the meat in his mouth and replied coolly, not bad. He then whistled into the air, and Mo chirped in response. In the blink of an eye, it appeared in front of Liemo. Liemo fed the rest of the meat in his hand to Mo, which it swallowed in one gulp, seemingly wanting more. You're too picky. Mo is much easier to feed, Yun Ruoyan commented. Then, one by one, they shared a good piece of meat with Mo. On the other hand, Liemo's face darkened. After a hearty meal, Yun Ruoyan wiped her mouth and asked Liemo about their next course of action. Zhuo Feng cupped his fists and leaned against the trunk of a large tree. His gaze wandered in a random direction, but his ears were pointed in Liemo's direction. Both you and Zhuo Feng need actual combat, Liemo began. We're currently on the outskirts of the forest, so there won't be any particularly powerful magical beasts. If we want to engage in actual combat with powerful beasts, we'll have to head east into the heart of the forest. Wasn't that fire hog a high-rank magical beast? Zhuo Feng asked. It was attracted by the bewitching flower. Now that it's been destroyed, there won't be any more high-rank magical beasts attracted by it in the short term, Liemo replied. In that case, let's set off right away. Yun Ruoyan exclaimed. The 3 of them walked quickly toward the heart of the forest for more than 2 hours. Suddenly, they heard another tremor in front of them. That trembling sound was even louder than the raging flame hog's movement. Even the huge treetops of the giant tree were rattling from the trembling. Yun Ruoyan and Zhuo Feng hadn't had much experience fighting magical beasts, and they were in an alternate dimension, where the beasts were much larger than those on the Qinyuan continent. Even with Liemo by their side, the presence of an unknown magical beast still made their faces pale. Just then, Qiuqiu told Yun Ruoyan that the beast's aura wasn't very strong, and that Yun Ruoyan didn't need to worry. As soon as Qiuqiu finished speaking, the beast broke through several giant trees and appeared in front of the 3 of them. Yun Ruoyan could see that it was a bull-shaped beast, as large as a small mountain. If one were to gouge out its eyes, they could use them as full-body mirrors. His 2 shiny horns were even more frightening. With a slight twist of his head, the sunlight that shone down from the treetops was reflected by the pair of horns, dazzling everyone's eyes. Let's go. Zhuo Feng reached behind him and took out a tiger-fang scissor and knocked it on his bow. There's no need, Liemo, who was standing behind Yun Ruoyan and Zhuo Feng, interjected. Yen can deal with them on her own. Yun Ruoyan turned to frown at Liemo, unable to hide the shock in her eyes. It wasn't that Yun Ruoyan was timid, but that the beast in front of her was so frightening that she had never encountered anything like it before. What, Yen, are you scared? Liemo smiled. Yun Ruoyan knew that Liemo was trying to goad her into action, but she quickly hid the shock in her eyes and smiled coolly. This beast is quite scary, but once I kill it, there won't be anything to be afraid of. Yun Ruoyan bent down to retrieve the dark steel dagger strapped to her thigh, gathered spiritual energy under her feet, and leaped toward the beast. Zhuo Feng, on the other hand, was still aiming his arrow at the beast's vitals, ready to fire at any moment. As a peak 7th rank blade master, Yun Ruoyan could leap more than 30 feet into the air. However, the beast was 40 feet tall, so Yun Ruoyan couldn't leap onto its back to attack. In midair, the bull-headed beast swung its head at Yun Ruoyan, slashing at her with its shiny horns. With a flip of her body, Yun Ruoyan lightly stepped on the bull's horn and flipped herself onto the beast's head. The bull-headed beast shook its head wildly, but Yun Ruoyan stabbed her dagger into its forehead. Although the beast's bones were hard, like most magical beasts, there was a small gap between the two bones of its forehead. Yun Ruoyan's dark steel dagger accurately pierced through that gap. However, the dark steel dagger was too short. It couldn't kill the giant bull. The giant bull became even crazier after being hit in its vitals. Yun Ruoyan gripped her dagger tightly as her body was flung into the air. NNNNN. Chapter 258. Shui Feng was just about to shoot an arrow to help Yun Ruoyan when he heard Li Mo's voice from behind. If you can't even deal with a low-rank beast like this on your own, then there's no need to venture into the forest. When Shui Feng saw that Yun Ruoyan wasn't in any danger, and when he heard Li Mo's words, he loosened his grip on the arrow. Yun Ruoyan, on the other hand, was feeling rather helpless. Although this beast wasn't as strong or intelligent as the low-rank beasts on the Qinyuan continent, its massive body and brute strength were still something to be reckoned with. Mistress, this beast's body is huge, and its skin is thick and coarse. If you want to kill it, you'll have to extract its beast core, Chocho's voice rang out in Yun Ruoyan's mind. I know. Yun Ruoyan replied. But the problem is that I can't move at all. Yun Ruoyan was clutching her dagger tightly in one hand and a handful of yellow fur on the bull's head in the other. She felt as if she were a leaf hanging from the trunk of a tree, and the slightest loosening of her grip would send her flying. This bull must be in so much pain that it's using its brute strength, Chocho explained. If you pull out the dagger, it'll definitely think that you've been flung away. Alright, I'll try. Yun Ruoyan gripped tightly on the bull's head with one hand and yanked the dagger out with the other. Yun Ruoyan complained incessantly. This bull is really too barbaric, Chocho thought to herself. Li Mo summoned his sword of azure light and leapt into the air to follow behind the bull. Shui Feng slung his bow on his back and followed closely behind. Li Mo's hands were clasped behind his back as he stood on his sword, following by Yun Ruoyan's side. He didn't seem to have the slightest intention of helping her. Yun Ruoyan didn't intend to call for help either. She didn't believe that a peak 7th rank blade master like her wouldn't be able to deal with a bull like this. If she wanted to kill the bull, she would have to extract its beast core. Yun Ruoyan stuck close to the bull's head as she moved toward the spot where she had stabbed her dagger. Then, she raised her dagger and stabbed it into the bull's skull once more. The bull once more went berserk from the pain, shaking its head as it galloped. Yun Ruoyan gritted her teeth, raised her hand, and stabbed the bull in the same direction 3 or 4 times in a row. Li Mo finally nodded approvingly when he saw Yun Ruoyan's actions. By Yun Ruoyan's 6th stab, a fist-sized hole had appeared in the bull's skull. Yun Ruoyan peered into the hole and saw a brownish-yellow beast core, about the size of an adult's head, just below the skull. Yun Ruoyan reached her hand into the hole. However, her arm and hand, as well as the hole she made with the black iron dagger, were too small compared to the inner core of the giant bull. It was almost impossible to take out the inner core. After a moment of hesitation, Yun Ruoyan decided that since she couldn't extract it, she would have to destroy it. As soon as Yun Ruoyan thought of this, she immediately used a fireball technique, condensing fire-attuned spiritual energy into a fireball in the palm of her hand. Then, she threw the fireball at the bull's beast core. The bull's beast core looked very large, but as soon as it was struck by Yun Ruoyan's fireball, it trembled violently. A giant tree was broken by the crash of the giant cow. Before the broken branches hit the cow's head, Yunruoyan had already nimbly jumped from the cow's head to the trunk of another giant tree, and then found another opportunity to quickly jump back onto the cow's head. After a while, the bull finally slowed down. Yunruoyan stood on the bull's head with one leg hooked around its horns, and she shot fireballs at the hole in the bull's head with both hands. The fist-sized hole was blasted into a huge hole. The fireball entered the hole and directly hit the bull's nadan. After a few rounds of bombardment, a crack finally appeared on the brownish-yellow inner dan, which was the size of an adult head. By the time Yunruoyan threw out her 8th fireball, the beast core finally shattered. Yunruoyan stood on the bull's head, her body tilting as the bull fell. She looked around, trying to find a place to land. Suddenly, she felt her body lighten, and Liemo hugged her by the waist. Yunruoyan turned to the person behind her and smiled. "How's that? This little bull is still not this young lady's opponent." Liemo looked at Yunruoyan, whose forehead was covered in a thin layer of sweat. He shook his head. "You're still inexperienced. If you encounter a beast that's all brute strength and no thought process, there's no need to hesitate. Just attack its beast core directly." By this time, Shuifeng had also rushed over. When he saw the bull lying on the ground, he couldn't help but click his tongue. It really was too big. "Shuifeng, let's see if you can refine those bull horns into arrowheads." Yunruoyan and Liemo descended from midair. Yunruoyan walked over to Shuifeng's side. The bull's beast core had been destroyed, and it was no longer breathing. However, its eyes were wide open, reflecting Yunruoyan and Shuifeng's silhouettes. Yunruoyan couldn't help but step forward and touch the bull's eyeball. It felt smooth and comfortable to the touch. "Mistress, there's a membrane on the bull's eyeball. You can remove it, and it might prove useful in the future," Chocho suggested. "All right." Yunruoyan took out her dark steel dagger and used the tip of the dagger to make a small incision around the bull's eyeball. Then, she gently removed a transparent membrane from the bull's eye. "It's beautiful." Yunruoyan couldn't help but exclaim at the translucent film in her hand. "It's indeed very beautiful." Liemo had appeared behind Yunruoyan at some point. With a flip of his hand, he took out a jade box. "You can store the membrane in here for safekeeping." Yunruoyan took the jade box, folded the membrane, and placed it inside. Then, she walked over to the other bull's eye and used the same method to remove the membrane from the other bull's eye. Yunruoyan stowed the jade box into her pocket dimension, which was just enough to fill up the 2 eye masks. With a flip of her hand, she stored the box in her bracelet. As soon as Yunruoyan was done, she heard a loud bang from the other side of the room. As it turned out, Shuifeng had leapt onto the bull's head and used his bowstring to easily cut off one of its horns. The horn fell to the ground and smashed a large hole in the ground. "It looks impressive, but why is it so fragile?" Yunruoyan wondered. "This bull's horn really isn't a high-grade material," Liemo said as he glanced at the bow in Liemo's hands. Liemo glanced at the bow in Liemo's hands. "But normal weapons won't be able to cut through it so easily." Liemo's bow, like your dagger, is made of dark steel, and its string is extremely thin, which is why it can cut through metal like it's mud. The bull's horn couldn't be used as an arrowhead, so it could only be discarded. Come over here." Liemo also leapt onto the bull's head and called out to Yunruoyan. Yunruoyan gathered spiritual energy beneath her feet and leapt to Liemo's side. Next to them was the crater that Yunruoyan had blasted open. Liemo motioned for Yunruoyan to look into the crater. Yunruoyan looked suspiciously into the crater, and to her delight, she saw a yellowish-brown bead in the same position as the bull's beast core that she had just destroyed. "Is this the bull's core?" Yunruoyan asked. Liemo nodded. "Your strength isn't enough to completely destroy the bull's beast core. All that's left is the bull's core, and it's even more valuable than a low-rank beast's core. Liamo reached toward the crater, and the yellowish-brown bead flew into his hand. This is an Earth attribute beast core, and it can't be used as a pill. It's useless to either of you, so I'll keep it. Liamo tucked the bead away. Zhuifeng jumped off the bull's head and walked up to its mouth. The bull's mouth was half open, and half of its tongue was sticking out. Zhuifeng used the bowstring to peel off the tongue's skin, leaving behind only a large piece of tender flesh. Dinner was finally ready. The three of them continued to advance towards the giant forest. After walking for about 4 hours, the sky darkened. There wasn't a single ray of moonlight in the forest, so the three of them decided to set up camp under a large tree. Zhuifeng wrapped the tongue in tree leaves, buried it in the soil, and roasted it for dinner. As she ate the fragrant tongue, which melted in her mouth, she thought to herself, Liamo really had foresight. Chapter 259. The two of them stared at the night sky for a while, breathing in the fresh air, before Liamo brought Yun Ruoyan to find a place to rest. Aw. You're not planning to let me sleep here, are you? Yun Ruoyan stared at the object in front of her in surprise. It was a large bird's nest in the middle of a large tree. What, you don't like it? Liamo dispelled the green light beneath his feet and brought Yun Ruoyan into the nest. No, not at all. Yun Ruoyan waved her hands and smiled. It's just too surprising. This nest is way too big. Yun Ruoyan estimated that the nest was more than 3 meters wide, and because it was circular, it was even larger. She really didn't know how big a bird would need such a large nest. Like a child, Yun Ruoyan hopped up and down on the nest, the soft twigs very bouncy. This is the nest of a night owl. It sleeps during the day and is active at night, so we'll use its nest to rest for the night, Liamo explained. Night owl? Yun Ruoyan said worriedly, the name sounds really powerful. Will it suddenly come back at night when we're asleep? No, it won't. No, it won't. Liamo had already laid down in the nest. Even if it does come back, I won't be afraid. Is that so? Yun Ruoyan hugged her knees as she sat down by Liamo's side. Are you saying that you won't sleep, and that you'll be keeping watch for me all night? There's someone keeping watch, but it won't be me, Liamo replied. He whistled, and the bird's cry echoed in the distance. Oh, I almost forgot about Imo, Air, Yun Ruoyan laughed. Imo, Air's low cry had knocked out a dozen wild beasts, so what was there to fear from a single night owl? Not long after, a silver-feathered Xiaomo flew over from afar and stopped at the edge of the nest, his beady eyes blinking as he looked at Yun Ruoyan. Yun Ruoyan hadn't seen Imo for the entire afternoon, and now that she saw it, she couldn't help but reach out to play with it. Where did you go? I slaughtered a giant bull this afternoon, and Zhuifeng roasted its tongue tonight. It was so delicious that I almost swallowed my own tongue. It's a pity that you weren't around. Xiaomo's mouth twitched. Yun Ruoyan rubbed her finger against his beak. Clearly able to understand Yun Ruoyan's words, Mo hopped around the edge of the nest, looking very regretful. Don't tease this stupid bird anymore. Liamo sat up and leaned against the edge of the nest, as lazy as Yun Ruoyan had ever seen him. His long black hair was combed behind his back, revealing his jade-like face. There was a smile at the corner of his mouth as he took out a small wine pot and sipped on it. Liamo wasn't drunk, but his long, slender eyes were subconsciously tinged with alcohol. Yun Ruoyan stared at Liamo in a daze for a moment before Mo's protesting chirps snapped her out of her reverie. All right, Yun Ruoyan replied. I'm half your master, after all. Why wouldn't I leave something delicious for you? As Yun Ruoyan spoke, she took out a bag of ox tongue wrapped in leaves and fed it piece by piece to Mo. After feeding it a whole bag, Mo let out a loud burp, causing Yun Ruoyan to giggle. Li Mo's long arms wrapped around the girl's waist, pulling her into his embrace. Yun Ruoyan didn't resist until Li Mo pressed her under his body and started kissing her forehead, the tip of her nose, and the corner of her mouth, all the way to her neck. Li Mo, you promised me that before I turn marriageable, Yun Ruoyan panted. After this year, I'll turn marriageable next year. Li Mo continued kissing her. During this training, I'll make sure you become an 8th rank blade master, and before we enter the alternate dimension, I'll marry you. I really can't wait. Although Li Mo said this, he still stopped in the end. Even though his desire for Yun Ruoyan had reached its peak, he still had to wait. Li Mo was currently a peak 9th rank blade master. As long as Yun Ruoyan's cultivation reached the peak of 8th rank, Li Mo would be able to mate with her. By then, Yun Ruoyan's body would be able to help him break through the bottleneck of 9th rank and become a sword saint. By then, he would be able to bring Yun Ruoyan into the alternate dimension, and their chances of returning safely would greatly increase. As a result, during this training, Yun Ruoyan's cultivation was of the utmost importance. I've heard that if you can't increase your cultivation through the training, you can eat a spiritual pill that can, Yun Ruoyan replied. That's just pulling a seedling up to help it grow, and it'll only be detrimental to your cultivation in the future. I won't let you eat that, Li Mo replied. Do you know why I chose this forest? I don't know, Yun Ruoyan replied curiously. Is there another reason? Of course. Yun Ruoyan nodded. Is there another reason? Of course. More than a year ago, I brought a group of students here for training. At that time, I discovered a heavenly spirit fruit in the center of the forest. However, it wasn't ripe at the time, and there were quite a few high-rank beasts guarding it, so I didn't dare to act rashly. However, I've calculated the time well, and the heavenly spirit fruit will ripen this month. When the time comes, I'll bring it for you, so that your cultivation won't improve. The heavenly spirit fruit. Yun Ruoyan couldn't help exclaiming, is that the legendary spiritual fruit that can help a cultivator break through any bottleneck? Yes, that's the one, Li Mo replied. However, legends are usually inaccurate. The heavenly spirit fruit can indeed help a cultivator break through bottlenecks, but it's not very effective for 9th rank cultivators to reach the peak of 9th rank. Another condition is that the cultivator must have a certain level of foundation in cultivation. For those without any spiritual energy at all, it's also ineffective. So there must be many 9th rank magical beasts guarding the heavenly spirit fruit. They're also waiting for the fruit to ripen, aren't they? Yun Ruoyan asked. Don't worry, I'm more than capable of dealing with a few 9th rank beasts, Li Mo replied nonchalantly. However, Yun Ruoyan knew that it wouldn't be easy to deal with 9th rank beasts in this forest of giant trees. She had to expend a lot of energy and spiritual energy to deal with the ox-headed beast, which was only 6th rank. Yun Ruoyan didn't even dare to imagine how big a 9th rank beast would be. Don't worry about me. Don't I have that stupid bird to help me? Li Mo whispered into Yun Ruoyan's ear. Yun Ruoyan looked toward the edge of the bird's nest. At some point, Xiao Mo had buried his head in his wings and fallen asleep. Yun Ruoyan, exhausted from a long day of running around, fell into a deep, dreamless sleep in Li Mo's arms. In her dreams, Yun Ruoyan could vaguely hear a rumbling sound. She frowned and opened her eyes. The rumbling came from below. Yun Ruoyan wanted to get up, but Li Mo hugged her tightly. It's just a herd of beasts passing by. Don't worry, go back to sleep. Yun Ruoyan turned around and saw Mo, pulling its head out from under its wings. Its long, sharp beak opened wide, and it yawned loudly before burying its head back into its nest. Yunruoyan let out a light breath, relaxed, and snuggled back into Limo's embrace. Limo tightened his grip on Yunruoyan's waist. Yen, you don't have to be so vigilant around me. Yunruoyan closed her eyes and snuggled deeper into Limo's embrace. Drowsiness washed over her once more, and she drifted off to sleep once more. In her dreams, Yunruoyan floated into a secluded valley. Where am I? Yunruoyan stood by a lake in the valley and looked around. She was surrounded by green mountains and clear waters, birds chirping, and the fragrance of flowers. You may. A clear male voice suddenly called out from afar. Yunruoyan turned in the direction of the voice. On a small path in the valley, a man dressed in coarse hemp clothes was striding toward her. The man was tall and slender, with a head of jet black hair tied neatly behind his head with a hemp rope. He had a handsome face, sword-like eyebrows, and a pair of sharp, bright eyes. He walked toward Yunruoyan with a warm smile on his face. You may. Yunruoyan repeated the name that the man had just called out. How do you know my mother's name? Who are you? The man ignored Yunruoyan's presence and walked right past her. Yunruoyan hurriedly turned back to ask. Hey, who the hell are you? As soon as she asked the question, Yunruoyan noticed that a thatched hut had appeared by the lake not far behind her. The man called out, You may, I'm back. I've hunted a wild pheasant today, and I'll cook some soup for you later. As he walked toward the thatched hut, Yunruoyan's heart began to pound. Yunruoyan's heart suddenly began to pound, and she hurried to catch up to him. Just as the man approached the hut, the door suddenly opened and a woman dressed like a village woman walked out of the hut. The woman wore a linen headscarf, which was commonly worn by peasant women. She wore a coarse cloth dress, and an apron was tied around her waist. Under the apron, he had a pot-bellied posture. Even though she was dressed like a village woman, Yunruoyan still recognized her as her mother, Lin Yuemei. Yunruoyan stopped walking and looked at the man and woman chatting and laughing. Long Yin, you're so hot, come wipe your sweat. Lin Yuemei took out a handkerchief from her waist and wiped the sweat off the man's forehead. Yuemei, look. The man showed the pheasant to Lin Yuemei. I'll go clean it up and make some soup for you tonight. It'll be good for you and my good yen, Long Yin said as he carried the pheasant to the lakeside and began to clean it up. Lin Yuemei stood behind him and smiled. How do you know it's going to be a girl? If it's going to be a boy, I'm sure he wouldn't want a name as feminine as Yen, Yuemei, I won't be wrong. Our child will definitely be as pretty as you. She'll definitely like the name I'll give her, Long Yen, Long Yen, that's a really nice name. Lin Yuemei smiled happily. Long Yen, Long Yen, Long Yen, Yunruoyan couldn't help repeating the name. Yen, wake up, Yen, Limo's voice rang out by Yunruoyan's ear. Yunruoyan opened her eyes, and Limo's face appeared in front of her. NNNNN. Chapter 260. Yen, what's wrong? Did you have a dream? Limo frowned as he looked at Yunruoyan's teary eyes. Yes, I had a dream. Yunruoyan sat up with Limo's support. What did you dream of? Limo's heart ached for Yunruoyan. This was the first time he'd seen her cry since they'd met. Yunruoyan shook her head, not answering Limo's question. Instead, she closed her eyes and tried to recall the scene in her dream. However, she suddenly realized that she couldn't remember what the man called Long Yin looked like. Everything in her dream was abnormally clear in her mind, the man's attire, the pheasant he carried in his hand. Lin Yuemei's pot-bellied, smiling face, the green mountains, the the clear waters, the birdsong, and the fragrance of flowers. But strangely, Yun Ruoyan couldn't remember what the man looked like. I can't remember. Yun Ruoyan buried her face in her knees and clutched her head in pain. Don't think about it if you can't remember. Liemo patted Yun Ruoyan's back comfortingly. It's just a dream. It's fine if you forget. After a while, Yun Ruoyan finally lifted her head from her knees. When she looked at Liemo again, her eyes were clear and bright. However, she didn't know if Liemo could see through the layers of fog behind her eyes. By then, the sky was already bright, and Zhuo Feng was most likely waiting for the two of them below. The two of them tidied up their clothes and prepared to meet up with him. Similarly, Yun Ruoyan had slept in the bird's nest for a night. Liemo's hair and robes were neat and tidy, but she herself was in a sorry state. After rushing all day and battling with the giant bull, her white uniform was a little disheveled. If possible, Yun Ruoyan really wanted to find a place to clean herself up. Just then, a clear and melodious chirp could be heard from below. Although she couldn't understand what Imo was saying, she could sense the flattery in its voice. Liemo shook his head and frowned. What a greedy bird. Only when the two of them descended from the forest did Yun Ruoyan realize why Xiao Imo was calling her so obsequiously. Zhuo Feng had already set up the fire. He had also sliced up the ox tongue and skewered it on the edge of the fire. Zhuo Feng turned back to greet Yun Ruoyan, then continued to sprinkle powder on the ox tongue. The fragrance of the spices began to spread. Xiao Imo flapped its wings and circled around Zhuo Feng, chirping again. What a gluttonous bird. Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but smile when she saw Mo's impatient expression. During breakfast, Yun Ruoyan recalled the rumbling that had occurred in the night and asked Zhuo Feng about it. According to Zhuo Feng, in the middle of the night, a large group of beasts had suddenly appeared in the direction of the forest. Those beasts were all quite large. However, based on their auras, Zhuo Feng guessed that most of them were low-rank beasts, and their cultivation was probably lower than that of the giant ox. After breakfast, the three of them continued deeper into the forest. Along the way, they frequently encountered beasts, but most of them were low-rank beasts. Instead of restraining their auras, the three of them released their auras so that the low-rank beasts would avoid them. Some of the stronger beasts would occasionally provoke the three of them, but they were all killed by Zhuo Feng and Yun Ruoyan without needing Mo's help. However, although these low-rank beasts didn't have a high cultivation, they were unusually large, and killing them took a lot of Yun Ruoyan and Zhuo Feng's energy and spiritual energy. As a result, the three of them slowed down to a certain extent. After killing 3 or 4 low-rank beasts and obtaining a fire-attuned beast core, a wood-attuned beast core, and 2 wind-attuned beast cores, Liemo decided to restrain his aura and speed up their journey. Because they had expended so much spiritual energy and stamina, the three of them found a place to rest in the evening. Yun Ruoyan and Zhuo Feng meditated to gather the spiritual energy in their spiritual vortex, while Liemo stood guard over them. Ever since she had become a peak 7th-rank blade master, Yun Ruoyan's spiritual vortex had more than doubled in size. Her spiritual sea was now divided into 2 parts. 2/3 of it was ordinary white spiritual power, and the remaining 1/3 was directly transformed into red fire elemental spiritual power. Yun Ruoyan channeled the spiritual energy from the heavens and the earth into her body, gathered it in her dantian, and then converted some of it into fire-attuned spiritual energy. Finally, she slowly opened her eyes. Her surroundings had once more fallen into darkness. By her side, Zhuo Feng was still meditating. Yun Ruoyan lifted her left hand and saw a string of ordinary-looking wooden beads next to a simple silver bracelet. Yun Ruoyan had learned from Cho that this seemingly ordinary wooden bead was actually a precious Qilin bracelet, which could help its wearer convert fire-attuned spiritual energy into fire-attuned spiritual energy. Yun Ruoyan's success in converting fire-attuned spiritual energy was all thanks to the Qilin bracelet. Yun Ruoyan gently caressed the bracelet, feeling its warmth. She couldn't help but turn her gaze toward Li Mo's back. She couldn't help but think back to the first time she had met Li Mo. At that time, Yun Ruoyan had still been an ugly girl, unloved by her father and unloved by her grandmother. All she had was a venomous body and a reborn soul filled with hatred. But now, she had a sister, a friend, and a man who treated her with sincerity. Even though Yun Ruoyan's heart was still a mess, even though she wasn't in a comfortable environment, she still felt a sudden sense of peace and happiness. At this moment, Yun Ruoyan still felt a sudden sense of calm and a faint sense of joy. As if sensing Yun Ruoyan's gaze, Li Mo turned to look at her. Yen, how's your cultivation going? Li Mo asked. I've fully recovered, and I can kill 2 more beasts in a row. Yun Ruoyan smiled. At this moment, a cry for help suddenly came from not far away. Is anyone there? Help! Both Li Mo and Yun Ruoyan frowned slightly. The person calling for help was none other than Guan Ruliu. At the time, Guan Ruliu had teamed up with 2 other students from the Southern College. Both of them were peak 6th rank blade masters, and Guan Ruliu herself was a peak 7th rank blade master. She had begun training in spiritual energy a year earlier, and her combat prowess far exceeded Yun Ruoyan's and Li Mo's. Based on the trio's combat ability, as long as they didn't enter the heart of the forest, they shouldn't be in much danger. She must have encountered something that caused her to call for help. Who's calling for help? Shui Fang had also woken up by then. It's senior sister Guan, let's go take a look. Yun Ruoyan stood up, and the 3 of them rushed in the direction of the voice. Less than half a kilometer away, the 3 of them arrived in an area filled with miasma. Li Mo immediately told Shui Fang and Yun Ruoyan to hold their breaths. Because of their spiritual vortices, the 3 of them could hold their breaths for a certain period of time. This miasma doesn't seem naturally formed, Shui Fang commented. Rather, it seems man-made. Shui Fang had been in and out of the forest since he was a child, and he was quite familiar with miasma. He knew that any miasma would be poisonous. However, natural miasma would carry with it a certain amount of water vapor that would evaporate from the ground, and the miasma surrounding the 3 of them was very dry. It really is man-made. Everyone, be careful, Yun Ruoyan whispered. Someone's looking for trouble. Li Mo didn't make a sound, but his brows were furrowed. He had already warned all the students that the purpose of this trial was to increase their cultivation and accumulate combat experience, and that they weren't to attack the other students. He had split the students into groups of 3, and tried his best to avoid putting those who were at odds with each other in the same group. This was because he was worried that having too many people in a group would lead to conflict, and that existing conflicts would escalate into a fight. Who would have thought that there would still be people who dared to disobey the precepts? They must be courting death. Senior Sister Guan, where are you? Yun Ruoyan called out to her surroundings. Yun Ruoyan, I'm here. Come and save us. Guan Ruliu's voice rang out once more, weak and devoid of spiritual energy. We're coming, Yun Ruoyan hurriedly replied. Together with Shui Fang and Li Mo, she walked toward the area where the miasma was the thickest. After passing through the layers of miasma, Yun Ruoyan finally saw Guan Ruliu. At the moment, she was suspended in midair by a large patch of coiled vines. It was already night time, and the coiled vines were black as ink. They were stacked on top of each other, intertwining with each other. It was a particularly eerie and terrifying sight. Senior Sister Guan, are you all right? Yun Ruoyan hurriedly asked. She wanted to walk closer, but she found that she was completely covered in vines, and there wasn't a single place for her to step. Shui Fang also drew his bow, but he didn't dare to act rashly because he didn't know what was going on. I'm fine, Guan Ruliu replied weakly. But my 2 juniors have been swallowed by the vines. Yun Ruoyan looked at the vines all over the ground, but she couldn't see a single person. The 2 juniors were both students of the Southern College, and they were on good terms with Yun Ruoyan. Yun Ruoyan was quite worried about their safety. Yun Ruoyan turned to look at Li Mo. What do we do now? Stay here and don't move, Li Mo instructed. Then, a green light rose from his feet as he flew toward Guan Ruliu. Li Mo stretched out 2 fingers, and white spiritual energy gathered at his fingertips. With a flash of white light, the vines broke, and Guan Ruliu landed in Li Mo's arms. Master Mo, the pale-faced Guan Ruliu finally relaxed a little in front of Li Mo. But just as Guan Ruliu was about to relax, something unexpected happened. Li Mo, be careful! Yun Ruoyan exclaimed. Behind Li Mo, beneath his feet, to his sides, and even above his head, countless vines had raised their heads and were glaring at Li Mo, as if countless venomous snakes were sticking out their tongues, ready to pounce on Li Mo at any moment. Chapter 261. Catch! Li Mo called out to Zhuifeng. He raised his hand and tossed Guan Ruliu toward him. Zhuifeng reacted quickly and caught Guan Ruliu. At the same time, he heard Yun Ruoyan's cry of alarm. Li Mo, be careful! The countless vines surrounding Li Mo suddenly attacked him at the same time. In the blink of an eye, Li Mo was completely surrounded. Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but think of the wild vine spirit they had encountered in the half-cliff cave in the Imperial territory. Those wild vine spirits could suck away a person's spiritual energy, and as long as they couldn't find the true body of the wild vine spirit, they wouldn't be able to kill it. The vines in front of them were most likely similar to those wild vine spirits, and they were many times more powerful than the wild vine spirits they had encountered in the Imperial territory. Those wild vines suck away a person's spiritual energy, Guan Ruliu muttered from within Zhuifeng's arms. Guan Ruliu forced herself to speak from within Zhuifeng's arms. Her words confirmed Yun Ruoyan's suspicions. At this time, Li Mo was completely wrapped up in the wild vines, and the surrounding vines were still surging towards him. The ball of vines was growing larger and larger. Yun Ruoyan saw that the vines weren't attacking her or Zhuifeng, but rather Li Mo. She guessed that Li Mo's powerful spiritual energy had attracted the vines to him. Thinking of this, Yun Ruoyan immediately threw a fireball at the depths of the wild vines. Zhuifeng placed Guan Ruliu behind him in a safe spot, then used a wood-attuned spiritual technique to attack the vines together with Yun Ruoyan. NN boom! 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 Yun Ruoyan kept throwing fireballs at the vines. The vines that came into contact with the fireballs were instantly charred, but the small patch that had been charred was quickly filled up by other vines. Yun Ruoyan's fireballs didn't seem to have much effect on the vines. Zhuifeng tried to use the wild vine technique to control the wild vines, but it was clear that his cultivation was not enough. Not only were the vines not under his control, but they were also attacking him. Zhuifeng could only use his bowstring to continuously slash the wild vines to protect himself and Guan Ruliu behind him. Yun Ruoyan and Zhuifeng's attacks had successfully drawn the attention of some of the wild vines, but the number of vines surrounding Li Mo continued to increase. Yun Ruoyan watched as Li Mo's rattan ball continued to grow larger and larger, and it continued to spin. She didn't know what Li Mo's condition was, and she grew more and more anxious. No longer caring about the danger, Yun Ruoyan threw fireballs at the vines in front of her, carving out a path for herself as she ran toward the vines. Ruoyan! Danger! Zhuifeng shouted from behind her. Zhuifeng, protect senior sister Guan. Yun Ruoyan turned to Zhuifeng. Yun Ruoyan didn't rush toward the ball of wild vines on a whim. As she ran, she observed her surroundings, searching for any traces of her true form. Suddenly, she saw a huge tree about 4 to 5 feet behind the ball of wild vines. That huge tree was completely wrapped in wild vines. At the roots of the tree, several extremely thick and sturdy wild vines slithered about like giant pythons. As Yun Ruoyan dealt with the vines that were attacking her with fireballs, her gaze followed the python-like vines all the way down until she finally discovered where they were growing. It was a patch of damp soil, from which the thick vines had sprouted. At first, the area had been covered by the stacked vines, but now that most of the vines had gathered around the ball of wild vines, the area where the vines were growing was exposed. Yun Ruoyan repeatedly used fireballs to repel the vines around her, then pulled out her dark steel dagger and leaped toward where the vines were growing. Yun Ruoyan could see that the thick vines were all branches of a single main vine, and that the main vine was as thick as 2 pythons. It had emerged from the wetlands, and it was as thick as 2 large pythons. Yun Ruoyan swung her dagger at the main vine, but what she didn't expect was that the main vine was not only thick, but also incredibly hard. Even though her dark steel dagger could cut through metal like it was mud, it only managed to leave a shallow cut on the vine. Yun Ruoyan looked at the ball of vines that was now the size of a house, but Liemo didn't react in the slightest. Liemo was intentionally releasing spiritual energy from his body, hoping to draw all the vines toward him so that he could kill them all in one fell swoop. Yun Ruoyan didn't know any of this, but she was more nervous and afraid than she had ever been before. As she screamed Liemo's name, she slashed at the vines with her dagger. Once, twice, thrice. Yun Ruoyan didn't even notice that the vines were slowly wrapping around her own body. When Liemo heard Yun Ruoyan's screams, he wanted to end the battle quickly, so he began to release all his spiritual energy. Attracted by the spiritual energy, the vines began to give up on attacking Zhuifeng, and even the vines that had wrapped around Yun Ruoyan retreated. In an instant, apart from the main vine that had grown out of the wetlands, almost all of the vine's branches rushed toward the ball of vines. The sphere became even bigger and was still growing. Countless vines were twisting around it, making it look quite terrifying. Yun Ruoyan was still slashing at the main vine with her dark steel dagger. Without the vines attacking her, Zhuifeng had a chance to run to her side. Zhuifeng used his bowstring to chop at the vine's trunk, but even the sharpest bowstring didn't have any effect. Moreover, Zhuifeng could see that the ball of vines was still growing in size, and it was already closing in on the two of them. Ruoyan, it's dangerous here. Zhuifeng reached out to grab Yun Ruoyan. Let's get out of here. Yun Ruoyan didn't seem to hear Zhuifeng's words, and she continued to stare at the vine's trunk. Ruoyan, let's get out of here. Zhuifeng grabbed Yun Ruoyan's hand anxiously. Don't pull me. Yun Ruoyan yelled at Zhuifeng. Don't pull me. I want to save Liemo, I want to save him. The slaughtering king's so strong, he'll be fine. Zhuifeng grabbed Yun Ruoyan by the waist and forcefully dragged her away. Let go of me, Zhuifeng, let go of me. Yun Ruoyan shouted. As soon as the two of them left the nest of vines, the indescribably large ball of vines began to change. Liemo had begun to attack. Inside the ball of vines, he heard Yun Ruoyan's screams and decided not to wait any longer. Zhuifeng and Yun Ruoyan saw that the ball of vines seemed to have been propped up by something, and it suddenly began to distort its original shape. Zhuifeng stopped and put Yun Ruoyan down, and the two of them stared at the ball of vines. As the ball of vines grew larger and larger, the vines wrapped around it seemed to have gone berserk, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws as they tried to escape. With a loud bang, the ball of vines finally exploded, sending vines flying in all directions. Zhuifeng helped Yun Ruoyan block the incoming vines with his bow. Yun Ruoyan finally saw Liemo standing in the middle of the ball of vines. Liemo! Yun Ruoyan called out to him. Liamo only had time to nod at Yunruoyan. Suddenly, there was a loud shriek as the vine's main body was jolted out of the ground by a violent tremor. The three of them looked in that direction and saw that the thick vine was actually connected to a humanoid monster. A vine demon. Yunruoyan couldn't help but exclaim. Everyone on the Qinyuan continent knew that demons were many times more powerful than spirits. The vine demon in front of them was covered in wet soil, and its head was still attached to the thick vine. It had a head, an upper body, and 2 arms, but its lower body was connected to countless vines. It was clearly a half-demon that hadn't fully matured yet. The vine demon's eyes, like 2 black holes, scanned Yunruoyan and Zhuorifeng's bodies, then landed on Zhuorifeng. Zhuorifeng's eyes flashed, and the vine demon trembled in fear. It then dove back into the wetlands, trying to escape. However, Liamo yanked on the vine that was attached to the vine demon's head, and it hauled once more as it was dragged back to the ground. Trying to escape. Liamo tightened his grip on the vine demon's head. Die! Seeing the killing intent in Liamo's eyes, the vine demon waved its hand and cut off the vine on its head, escaping Liamo's control. As soon as it landed on the ground, it burrowed into the wet soil like an earthworm. You're courting death. Liamo roared again as he appeared above the vine demon on his sword. The vine demon's movements were also very fast. By the time Liamo arrived, the last of its vines had already sunk into the ground. Upon seeing this, Liamo leaped down from the sword. This time, the sword didn't disappear, but hovered properly in midair. Liamo stood on the wetlands, where the vine half-demon had burrowed its way into. He pointed a finger at the azure sword, and it let out a shrill cry as it dove into the wetlands in response to Liamo's finger. Immediately afterwards, the ground shook, and the vine half-monster let out a muffled shriek. Liamo directed the sword to burrow out of the ground, which pierced through the vine demon's body and brought it out of the wetlands. Liamo put away the sword, and the vine demon landed on the ground, trembling as it begged for its life. Liamo didn't hesitate to release a fireball technique. A giant fireball engulfed the vine demon, and in a few moments, the vine demon was reduced to ashes. Yunruoyan stood behind Zhuorifeng, seemingly unable to react. Liamo turned to Yunruoyan and smiled as he extended a hand. Only then did Yunruoyan recover from her shock. Liamo, are you all right? Yunruoyan walked up to Liamo and looked up at him. Liamo caressed Yunruoyan's cheek and smiled. How could anything happen to me? It's just that this half-demon is far too cunning. If I didn't show it a little weakness, it would have escaped immediately. Chapter 262. Liamo's smile widened as he looked at Yunruoyan's reddened eyes. But, I really like seeing you worry about me. Looking at his smiling face, Yunruoyan couldn't help but feel an inexplicable anger rise from the bottom of her heart. She reached out and slapped Liamo's hand away. You! Yunruoyan glared at Liamo, but she didn't know how to put her anger into words. She suddenly felt foolish. Liamo was the slaughtering king. How could the slaughtering king, whose name shook the entire Qinyuan continent, be harmed by a mere vine spirit? But even though Yunruoyan had always been able to remain calm in the face of danger, upon seeing Liamo in danger, she had completely lost her ability to judge. Anxiety and fear, which he had never felt before, surged up at the same time. But now, seeing Liamo standing in front of her, all her nervousness and fear transformed into an inexplicable anger that she didn't know how to vent. Seeing her angry expression, Liamo reached out and pulled her into his embrace. Silly girl, I'm fine. On the Qinyuan continent, there aren't many things that can harm me. Tears began to gather in Yunruoyan's large eyes, and finally, 2 crystalline teardrops dripped down her cheeks. Liamo, promise me that you'll never let anything happen to me, alright? Yun Ruoyan whispered in Li Mo's arms. Alright, I promise you, Li Mo replied seriously. Not far away, Shui Feng turned his gaze elsewhere when he saw the two of them hugging. Inadvertently, his gaze fell on two protruding spots in the pile of vines. Shui Feng saw that those protruding spots looked very humanoid, and he walked over. After Li Mo had killed the vine spirit, all the vines in the area had withered, leaving only a pile of withered twigs on the ground. The two human figures were hidden beneath the withered twigs. Shui Feng walked forward and used the bough in his hand to pry open the branches, only to see two people lying on the ground. They're here. Shui Feng called out. Li Mo and Yun Ruoyan walked over. Shui Feng didn't recognize the two of them, but Yun Ruoyan did. They were Guan Ruliu's companions. Shui Feng reached out his hand to check their breathing. Seeing that they were still alive, he reached out his hand to check their necks. His brows furrowed. All of their spiritual energy has been absorbed by the vine spirit, and their spiritual vortices have also been damaged. I'm afraid they won't be able to keep their cultivation. Yun Ruoyan and Shui Feng both looked grave. The surrounding miasma was indeed man-made, and they couldn't be sure who had harmed Guan Ruliu and her companions before they were. Shui Feng and Li Mo each carried the two students out of the vine spirit's nest. Guan Ruliu's condition was much better than the two unconscious students. Although she had lost almost all of her spiritual energy, her spiritual vortex hadn't been damaged, and it wouldn't be difficult for her to recover after some rest. Li Mo handed Yun Ruoyan a quintessence elixir, which Yun Ruoyan fed to Guan Ruliu. With Yun Ruoyan's help, Guan Ruliu was able to stand up. By this time, the sky was completely dark. Because of the three injured students, Yun Ruoyan and her companions couldn't go to higher ground to rest. They could only find a more secluded place to rest. After settling the three injured students down, Shui Feng started a fire. After a short rest, Guan Ruliu's pale face regained some color. Yun Ruoyan handed her some roasted meat, and she forced herself to eat it all. Senior Sister Guan, how did you end up in the vine spirit's nest? Yun Ruoyan asked. Although I don't have any evidence, I'm certain that Rong Yuashan and the others were the culprits, Guan Ruliu suddenly declared angrily. Rong Yuashan, Yi Qianing, Pei Xiao, Guan Tianyu, and two other students from the Northern College have formed a team. Indeed, they're all birds of the same feather, Yun Ruoyan muttered angrily. As soon as she had discovered the miasma, she had suspected that it was the culprit. But she couldn't think of a motive for these people to harm Guan Ruliu at the moment. How can you be certain that Rong Yuashan and the others were the culprits? Li Mo countered. As the leader of this trial and the instructor of Kongming Academy, he needed concrete evidence. Yesterday, we encountered them on the road. I didn't want to get involved with them, so I took a different path with my two juniors, Guan Ruliu began. But in the middle of the night, I suddenly heard the voices of a man and a woman talking. When I woke up, I found that I was surrounded by miasma. Although she hadn't seen them, the voices sounded like Rong Yuashan and Guan Tianyu. Yun Ruoyan frowned slightly. Did you hear what Rong Yuashan said? Guan Ruliu thought for a moment. I think I heard them say that they wanted to use us to harm someone, but I didn't hear who exactly. Yun Ruoyan and Shui Feng exchanged a glance, both of them having a rough idea of what was going on. Rong Yuashan, Guan Tianyu, Yi Qianing, and Pei Xiao, there was no one else they wanted to harm other than Yun Ruoyan. When I woke up, I found that the miasma surrounding me was poisonous, and I'd already breathed in some of it in my sleep. Fortunately, my cultivation is relatively high. Even if I breathed in some of the poisonous gas, I could still move. However, the two junior brothers immediately fell unconscious. Guan Ruliu glanced at the two students from the Southern College who had woken up after being rescued, and Yun Ruoyan had fed each of them a life quintessence pill. Although their lives were no longer in danger, according to Liemo, it was likely that the cultivation they had accumulated over the years would be at risk. Because they were so weak, they had both fallen asleep. I wanted to bring my 2 juniors out of the miasma, so I headed toward the area where it was thinner, Guan Ruliu continued. As a result, we unknowingly entered the wild vine demon's lair. As soon as the wild vines touched our bodies, they began to absorb the spiritual energy in our bodies. We didn't have the ability to resist. My 2 juniors were swallowed whole, and I was hung upside down for a day and a night. Just when I thought I was going to die, you guys finally showed up. Guan Ruliu's heart was still pounding. Yun Ruoyan reached out to hold her hand and comforted her. Senior Sister Guan, we're fine now. In the darkness of the night, 6 dark figures darted through the forest. When they reached the miasma, the 4 of them stopped. Sister Yi, let's get rid of the miasma, Rong Yuashan called out to Yi Qianying. These 6 people were none other than Yi Qianying, Rong Yuashan, Pei Zio, Guan Tianyu, and a male and female student from the Northern College. The lanky male student was called Song Yi, and the beady-eyed female student was called Sun Yen. All right, Yi Qianying replied. Yi Qianying. After that, she took out some medicinal powder from her pouch. She then turned to Song Yi and Lin Feng and said, Song fellow disciple, Sun fellow disciple, please help me. The 2 of them nodded and said, no problem. Song Yi flicked the packet of medicinal powder in Yi Qianying's hands, and a spark flew from his fingertip into the powder. The powder didn't ignite upon meeting the spark. Instead, a white, odorless smoke rose. Sun Yan extended her fair and slender jade-like hands, and lightly fanned the smoke coming out of the powder. A gentle breeze rose from her palms, bringing the smoke into the miasma. When the miasma met the white, odorless smoke, the 2 sides converged and disappeared. When the miasma completely disappeared, the 6 of them quickly made their way back to the wild vine nest. When they saw the withered vines in front of them, they weren't surprised. Third uncle was right. This half-demon really isn't a match for the slaughtering king, Rong Yuashan said. The third uncle she was referring to was Rong Tianhai. Master Rong said that Master Mo is already a peak 9th rank blade master, and is infinitely close to becoming a sword saint, Guan Tianyu explained. The vine half-demon is only a peak 8th rank blade master, and its body is extremely fragile. Once it's caught, it won't be able to fight back. Master Mo is ruthless. As soon as he catches the vine half-demon, he'll definitely kill it. Because of the presence of the miasma, he'll definitely leave as soon as he saves the victim. Yi Qianying continued, Master Rong's foresight is truly divine. Guan Tianyu laughed. Because he was in such a hurry to save the victim and killed the vine half-demon, there's no way he'll find anything left behind. Let's look around. As soon as Guan Tianyu finished speaking, the 6 of them began to comb through the area. After the time it takes for a stick of incense to burn, Pei Zio found the place where the half-demon's main body was hiding. Pei Zio pushed aside the thick, withered vines and saw that the wetland below was glowing with a faint green light. Here it is. Pei Zio called out, and the other 5 quickly surrounded him. This is it, Rong Yuashan said. Under the illumination of the green fluorescent light, the faces of the 6 people present all lit up. Be careful, don't scare it, and don't let it escape, Guan Tianyu said carefully, crouching down. Then, the 6 of them formed a circle around the fluorescent wetland, and all of them bent down. Guan Tianyu gestured to the other 5, and they all held their breaths as they watched Guan Tianyu's movements. He took out a dagger and a golden rope that looked like a headband from his waist. Guan Tianyu gently dug into the wetland with the dagger, and before long, he had dug out a jade-green root. Everyone's eyes lit up, and Guan Tianyu carefully continued to dig along the root. Be careful, everyone, it's coming out, Guan Tianyu said softly as he dug. Not long after he finished speaking, a jade green light suddenly shot out of the ground. The 6 of them reached out to cover it, but the green light was blocked. It turned and tried to burrow back into the wetland, but Guan Tianyu's red rope was already tied into a knot, waiting for it. The green fluorescent light drilled into the buckle. Guan Tianyu stretched out his hand and pulled the buckle, tightly fastening the little thing that was emitting fluorescent light. Got it, got it. Guan Tianyu stood up excitedly, holding the red rope in his hand. Everyone's eyes turned to the thing tied to the red rope. Chapter 263. The thing tied to the rope was as thick as 2 thumbs. It had the appearance of a human infant, its body translucent and glowing with a green light. Coincidentally, the red rope was wrapped around its slender neck, and Guan Tianyu was holding the other end of the rope in his hand. The baby, who was not much bigger than a thumb, stuck out his tongue and stared at the people around him with his small eyes. Is this the spirit treasure that Master Rong was talking about? Yi Qianying asked. A spirit treasure could be understood as a descendant of a demon. After a demon's death, it would inherit its strength and abilities. As long as the demon wasn't dead, the spirit treasure wouldn't be able to grow. Its intelligence was only equivalent to that of a 2- or 3-year-old child. Once the demon died, however, the spirit treasure would grow rapidly gaining the demon's strength and abilities. Not every Yao could have their own children, and the Yao of the Qinyuan continent were a rather heaven-defying existence. After a human or an animal with spiritual energy died, its spirit would attach itself to another animal or plant and continue to exist in the world. Because of their heaven-defying nature, it was very rare for demons to have their own descendants. Especially for wild vine demigods that had yet to fully transform into demons, it was even rarer to have their own descendants. The spirit treasure's intelligence was only equivalent to that of a 2- or 3-year-old child's, so it was very easy to tame. If one could capture the spirit treasure and kill it, then make it recognize them as its master, it would be equivalent to owning a powerful killing weapon. 2 months ago, Rong Tianhai had brought a group of students from the Northern College into the forest for a trial, and they'd stumbled upon the spirit treasure playing outside. The little thing was extremely alert, and at the same time that Rong Tianhai discovered it, the spirit treasure had discovered Rong Tianhai as well. Rong Tianhai had chased it all the way until he discovered the wild vine demon's existence. In order to obtain this demon treasure, Rong Tianhai had fought against the vine half-demon. However, with Rong Tianhai's cultivation base, he wasn't a match for the vine half-demon. In the end, he could only return in defeat. However, Rong Tianhai had made a mental note of this half-demon and its treasures. When Li Mo had suggested entering the forest, Rong Tianhai had already come up with a plan to use Li Mo to kill the half-demon. Senior Marshal Brother Guan, we can't stay here for long. Rong Yuashan looked around and said, we need to quickly take the demon treasure and leave this place. Guan Tianyu took out a red pouch and placed the demon treasures inside, then tied it to his waist, and the 6 of them hurriedly left. 2.5 miles away, while Rong Yuashan and the others were searching for spirit beasts, Li Mo, Yun Ruoyan, and the others had already begun to rest. In the middle of the night, Yun Ruoyan once again heard the rumbling of wild beasts in her dreams. Yun Ruoyan sat up and saw Li Mo and Zhuo Feng standing not far from her. Guan Ruliu and the other 2 students were too weak and had fallen into a deep sleep, so they didn't notice anything. As the rumbling grew closer and closer, Yun Ruoyan walked up to Li Mo's side and asked, "It's a wild beast passing by. Should we hide?" "No," Li Mo replied. "It sounds like it's not far from us, so it won't reach here." Li Mo glanced at Yun Ruoyan, then at Zhuo Feng. "I'll bring Yen over to take a look at the situation. You stay here and protect the 3 of them." Then, Li Mo took Yun Ruoyan on his sword and flew toward the source of the rumbling. Not long after, the two stopped on a branch of a huge tree, the rumbling sound of wild beasts on the ground ringing in their ears. Yunruoyan infused a large amount of spiritual energy into her eyes to enhance her night vision, then looked in the direction of the sound. Every tree here was massive, and there was a large gap between them. In some places where the canopy wasn't dense enough, the moonlight still managed to penetrate the canopy. Coupled with Yunruoyan's enhanced night vision, she could clearly see a large horde of beasts charging toward her and Liemo from between the giant trees. Yunruoyan had seen a beast stampede in the imperial territory before, and the sight of a large horde of beasts charging at one another had left a deep impression on Yunruoyan. But what she was seeing now had completely changed her impression of such a spectacle. Each of the beasts was so large that it seemed as if the earth itself was shaking as they ran. About 7 or 8 wild beasts dashed past Yunruoyan and Limo's feet, and one of them accidentally knocked into the tree they were standing on, causing the tree to shake violently. Yunruoyan was prepared. She held onto the tree trunk with one hand and Liemo with the other, so that even if the tree broke, she wouldn't be afraid. The tree only shook for a moment before it regained its footing. Yunruoyan looked down at the beast that had crashed into the tree. It was clearly dizzy from the impact, and after shaking its head a few times, it began to run again. Where are they going? Yunruoyan asked Liemo, puzzled. I've been in this forest twice before. The first time, I encountered wild beasts, but the second time, I didn't see any, Liemo explained. He told Yunruoyan that there were 2 possible scenarios for a large horde of wild beasts to appear. The first was the birth of a powerful beast, which would then expand its territory and drive away the weaker beasts and beasts. The second was that a treasure was about to be born, and a large horde of beasts would come to snatch it. The weaker beasts and beasts would flee in order to preserve their lives. Liemo, which scenario do you think it's going to be? Yunruoyan asked. It's most likely the second scenario. The heavenly spirit fruit is about to ripen, Liemo murmured. But we'll have to wait for that silly bird to return before we know what's going on. That evening, Liemo sent Imo ahead to scout out the situation, and it was expected to return at daybreak. Just as dawn broke, Imo returned. It perched on Limo's shoulder and chirped for a while. Yunruoyan didn't understand Imo's bird language, but Chocho did. Chocho translated Imo's words for Yunruoyan. Imo told Liemo that it had encountered 3 or 4 groups of wild beasts along the way, and that there were more and more magical beasts among them, and the beasts were of higher and higher levels. Some of them were even more powerful than the others. The deeper they went into the forest, the denser the aura they emitted. Imo said that such a powerful aura could only be released by beasts at the level of a 9th-rank blade master. Moreover, this aura wasn't coming from just one beast, but from several at the same time. The wild beasts and lower-ranked beasts had been intimidated by this powerful aura. Yunruoyan thought back to what Liemo had told her last night. If a powerful beast were to be born, then there could only be a single aura. Now that there were so many of them, it could only be the second possibility that Liemo had mentioned. After hearing Imo's findings, Liemo made a decision to send Guan Ruliu and the other 2 students back to the treehouse. Because the 3 of them had lost their teleportation scrolls in the miasma, Liemo had no choice but to send them back on his sword. Fortunately, the 2 students finally woke up early in the morning, and Liemo sent them back in 2 separate batches. Liemo first sent the 2 weaker students, then returned to pick up Guan Ruliu. It's a pity that I've only been here for a few days, and I'm already injured. I won't be able to continue training with the 3 of you, Guan Ruliu sighed as she leaned against the trunk of a large tree. After a night of recuperation, Guan Ruliu's cultivation had returned to 5th rank, but she was still far from her original 8th rank. As a 5th rank blade master, he could, with some difficulty, continue the training with Yunruoyan's group. However, the 2 students from the Southern College had already lost their cultivation, and they were now mere commoners. Without anyone to look after them, they would never survive in the forest. Senior sister, don't be discouraged, Yun Ruoyan consoled. This time, there'll be more than one dimension. Once you've recovered your cultivation, we'll head to another dimension together for training. As the two of them spoke, Shui Feng suddenly made a shushing gesture, and the two of them fell silent. Suddenly, they heard the sound of footsteps. A short while later, 6 people walked out from the direction the sound had come from. What a coincidence to run into you here. Guan Tianyu, who was walking at the front of the group, smiled. Indeed, Rong Yuashan replied. Beside Guan Tianyu, Rong Yuashan laughed as well. The forest of giant trees is so big, it's truly a coincidence that we ran into each other. Guan Ruliu stood up and glared at them. Why are you following us? Do you want to harm us again? Senior Sister Guan, why would you say something like that? Yi Qianning pretended to be confused. Have we ever harmed you? Do you dare to say that we haven't? Guan Ruliu and her 2 junior brothers could be considered to have escaped from death. Her 2 junior brothers' cultivation had been crippled, and her own cultivation had also greatly regressed. She had no choice but to end this trial, and the 3 of them had almost lost their lives. If not for Yun Ruoyan holding her back, Guan Ruliu's heart would have been filled with rage. Had it not been for Yun Ruoyan holding her back, she would have charged forward and attacked them. No matter who it was, they would not be able to remain calm after seeing the person who had harmed them appear in front of them as if nothing had happened. Senior Sister Guan Tianyu continued. Guan Tianyu continued, as a senior of Kongming Academy, how could you slander your juniors? I'm sure you know full well whether I'm slandering them or not, Guan Ruliu replied, suppressing her anger. What a joke. As long as there's no evidence, it's slander. You. Guan Ruliu was furious. Yun Ruoyan squeezed her hand and whispered in her ear, there are 6 of them right now, and we're no match for them. Once Master Mo returns, he'll give you justice. When Guan Ruliu heard this, she forcefully suppressed the anger in her heart. She shifted her gaze away from them and didn't say anything else. However, Rong Yuashan and the others were clearly here to cause trouble. When they saw that Guan Ruliu wasn't saying anything, they asked, Senior Sister Guan, why are there only the 3 of you? Where did your 2 junior brothers and Master Mo go? Chapter 264. What are you trying to do? Shui Feng, who had been silent all this time, suddenly stood in front of Yun Ruoyan and Guan Ruliu. We're not trying to do anything. We're all from the same sect, and we're just concerned about each other. Guan Tianyu glanced sideways at Shui Feng. We don't need your concern. Please leave immediately. Shui Feng said rudely. We'll leave just because you tell us to. Who gave you such a big mouth? Pei Zio laughed coldly. Pei Zio. Yun Ruoyan finally spoke up. Don't say I didn't warn you, but Master Mo said not to kill each other. If you know what's good for you, stay away from us. Otherwise, even if it's 3 against 6, you might not be a match for them. Yun Ruoyan wasn't boasting. She still had a trump card up her sleeve. Yun Ruoyan stared straight at Pei Zio. Pei Zio, who hadn't interacted with Yun Ruoyan in a long time, felt a little intimidated by her glare. Yun Ruoyan's eyes were filled with hatred and resentment. Pei Zio had never understood where Yun Ruoyan's hatred for him came from. He tried to figure it out, and he'd even tried to get closer to Yun Ruoyan. But how could a grudge left over from a previous life be so easily resolved? Finally, after Yun Ruoyan knocked him off the cliff, Pei Zio completely gave up on trying to improve their relationship. From then on, to Pei Zio, Yun Ruoyan's existence was irreconcilable. Right now, Yunru Oyan was looking at Zhuo Feng the same way she had when she knocked him off the cliff, as if she wanted to take his life. Pei Xiao was still puzzled as to why Yunru Oyan hated him. However, he knew that perhaps this mystery would never be solved, or perhaps there was no answer to it at all. Because sometimes, you don't need a reason to hate a person. If you don't want to cause trouble, you'd better leave immediately. Yunru Oyan continued coldly. If you want to cause trouble, we don't mind playing along. What a joke. This forest doesn't belong to your family, so we can go wherever we want, Yi Qianying said indifferently. 3 against 6. Interesting. Guan Tianyu chuckled. He knew that Yunru Oyan and Zhuo Feng had decent cultivations, but at the same time, he also knew that Guan Ruliu was injured and would definitely be a burden. On the other hand, the 6 of them were unscathed, and their cultivations were not low either. If Guan Ruliu hadn't been injured, with the help of an 8th-rank blade master, they might have been able to take on 3 of them, but in this situation, Yunru Oyan was far too arrogant. I really want to give it a try, Guan Tianyu said with a mocking tone. Zhuo Feng had always been a straightforward person. The 6 people in front of him were obviously here to cause trouble. Before Yunru Oyan could open her mouth again, Zhuo Feng had already taken out his bow and arrows and drawn them into a crescent shape, his gaze piercing as he stared at the 6 of them. What do you think you're doing, kid from the Central College? Song Yi, who was tall and skinny, stepped in front of Guan Tianyu. Song Yi and Sun Yan were 2 of the strongest cultivators in the Northern College, and they were adept at teamwork. During this training, the 2 of them had received orders from the second elder to protect Guan Tianyu. As Zhuo Feng drew his bow, he growled, "You'd better not provoke us. This bow doesn't have eyes." Yi Qianying, Pei Xiao, and Rong Yuashan had all seen Zhuo Feng's swordsmanship before, and when they saw him draw his bow, they couldn't help but take a step back. Guan Tianyu, Song Yi, and the beady-eyed Sun Yan didn't know how powerful Zhuo Feng's arrows were. Humph. Song Yi snorted coldly. A piece of trash from the Central College dares to be so arrogant. These new students really need a lesson, Guan Tianyu commented. It's one thing for the Southern College to be so arrogant, but even the trash from the Central College dares to bare their fangs and brandish their claws at me. Last time, you teamed up to embarrass me in front of everyone. If I don't take this opportunity to teach you a lesson, who knows how arrogant you'll become. The last time Zhuo Feng had injured Guan Tianyu with a flurry of flying needles in order to help Yunru Oyan, Guan Tianyu had remembered him ever since. However, he hadn't had a chance to exact his revenge. Now that Liemo wasn't around, and Yunru Oyan's group was outnumbered, it was the perfect opportunity for him to exact his revenge. However, the last time Yunru Oyan and Zhuo Feng had teamed up, they had put him in a difficult position, and he was a little wary of Liemo's warning. When he'd attacked Guan Ruliu and the others, he'd done so discreetly that he hadn't left any evidence behind. This time, however, he'd openly provoked them while Liemo wasn't around. If things got out of hand, Liemo wouldn't pursue the matter either, so Guan Tianyu didn't make a move immediately. Senior brother Guan, you don't have to personally teach a piece of trash from the Central College a lesson. I'll do it myself, Song Yi volunteered. At this moment, Song Yi volunteered. He took a step forward as if he was going to teach Zhuo Feng a lesson. You're right, I don't have to personally deal with a piece of trash. Junior brother Song, I'll leave it to you. Guan Tianyu was glad that someone had stepped forward. As Song Yi spoke, he glanced at Sun Yan, who stood by his side. Sun Yan understood, and she extended her hands toward Zhuo Feng. Her hands were surprisingly good-looking. Sun Yan's slender, jade-like hands crossed in front of each other and made a flying gesture. A faintly discernible gust of wind followed her gesture and blew towards Zhuo Feng. Yunru Oyan, who was standing behind Zhuo Feng, also felt this gust of wind. She couldn't help but raise her guard, but strangely, it didn't seem to contain any offensive power. Just as the three of them were wondering what was going on, Yunruoyan suddenly saw Song Yi clench his hands together and flick them in their direction. Two visible sparks flew out from his fingertips. Sun Yan continued fanning herself with her hand. When the two sparks from Song Yi's flick came into contact with the wind, they suddenly burst into flames with a loud bang. A large ball of fire suddenly burst forth, bringing with it scorching heat as it flew toward the three of them. Zhuo Yifeng had been drawing his bow with both hands, and he hadn't noticed Song Yi's movements. As a result, he was caught off guard by the sudden burst of fire. Yunruoyan, on the other hand, was quick to react. She threw a fireball at the ball of fire, and when the two balls of fire collided, there was another loud explosion. Yunruoyan's fireball was a combination of wind and fire, but it was still slightly weaker than the resulting flames. However, it was still able to block most of the flames, and it bought the three of them some time to retreat. Zhuo Yifeng took 2 or 3 steps back in order to avoid being roasted by the flames. At the same time, he let go of the bowstring he had drawn. "Ah!" A man's pained cry rang out. "Senior brother." A woman's voice followed. Only when the flames had completely dissipated did Yunruoyan's trio see the situation in front of them. On the ground opposite them, Song Yi lay in Sun Yan's arms, an arrow shot by Zhuo Yifeng in his chest. The arrow that Zhuo Yifeng had unintentionally shot out just now had actually hit the thin and tall Song Yi, and it had even hit a vital point in his chest. "You!" Song Yi lay in Sun Yan's arms, pointing a finger at Zhuo Yifeng as he opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. "Senior brother, are you all right?" Sun Yan hugged Song Yi tightly, and she was on the verge of tears. "I." Song Yi opened his mouth and spat out another mouthful of blood. Zhuo Yifeng's archery was incredible, and the two of them had been so close to each other. Even an unintentional shot was enough to take Song Yi's life. I. Song Yi couldn't finish his sentence. His eyes rolled back into his head, and he died. "Senior brother." Sun Yan cried out in agony. On the surface, the two of them were brother and sister, but in reality, they were a couple. Naturally, Sun Yan wouldn't let the matter rest. She put Song Yi down from her arms, stood up, and screamed at Zhuo Yifeng, "I'll kill you." Zhuo Yifeng hadn't intentionally shot Song Yi, but if the latter had threatened his life, he would have killed him without hesitation. As a result, Zhuo Yifeng had no intention of explaining himself. "If you want revenge, I'll keep you company. Come." As soon as Zhuo Yifeng finished speaking, Sun Yan's body suddenly blurred, and she disappeared without a trace. Everyone was stunned by this scene. What's going on? Why did senior sister Sun suddenly disappear? Yi Qianing, half hidden behind Pei Zio, exclaimed. Suddenly, disappeared. Rong Yuashan was also shocked. Yun Ruoyan and Guan Ruliu immediately rushed to Zhuo Yifeng's side. The three of them stood back to back, forming a tight defensive formation. Senior sister Sun is one of the best wind-attuned cultivators in the Northern College, Guan Tianyu began, his tone smug, as if he were watching a good show unfold. She can already use the wind-attuned spiritual energy in the air to conceal herself. She didn't attack all this time because she wanted to spare your lives, but you actually killed Song Yi. This time, we won't even need to act, she alone will be enough to kill all of you. Prepare to die. Everyone, be careful. Guan Ruliu cautiously looked around. Sun Yan's cultivation doesn't allow her to conceal herself for long. Be careful, don't give her a chance to escape. She'll appear very soon. Over there. Indeed, Yun Ruoyan saw a figure flash in front of her, then vanish again. Not good. Guan Ruliu exclaimed. Although her cultivation isn't high enough to conceal herself for long, she's using her speed to make up for the time needed to conceal herself again. She's too fast, and we won't be able to catch her at all. Slash. Just then, Zhui Feng's bow-wielding arm was suddenly cut open by Sun Yan, and fresh blood gushed out. Chapter 265. Sun Yan had successfully ambushed Zhui Feng by concealing herself. Then, Yunruoyan saw her figure flicker not far from Zhui Feng, as if she was about to launch another sneak attack on him. Zhui Feng, be careful. Yunruoyan warned as she threw a fireball in her direction. Sun Yan's attempt to launch another sneak attack was thwarted by Yunruoyan. She reappeared some distance away from the three of them, a dagger in her hand that was still stained with Zhui Feng's blood. She glared at Yunruoyan with her beady eyes. I only want to take Zhui Feng's life to avenge my senior brother. The two of you had better not interfere. Speaking of revenge, I also have a score to settle with you. Guan Ruliu replied coldly. You want to kill the three of us? I'm afraid it won't be so easy. Alright, in that case, I'll kill all three of you at once, Sun Yan declared viciously. That way, my senior brother won't be lonely on his way to the Yellow Springs. As soon as she finished speaking, Sun Yan disappeared once more. This time, it was Guan Ruliu who was injured. A deep gash appeared on the back of her right hand. Flying needles. Zhui Feng sent a large swarm of sharp flying leaves at Guan Ruliu's side. Sun Yan had been injured by the flying leaves, revealing her true form. Fireball technique. As soon as Sun Yan revealed her true form, Yunruoyan released an enormous fireball at her. As Sun Yan dodged the flying needles, she couldn't dodge Yunruoyan's fireball in time, and the fireball flew straight at her. Sun Yan's reaction was also extremely fast. Her beautiful hands made a beautiful gesture, and a gust of wind appeared in her hands, fanning towards the fireball. The fireball was blown off course by the gust of wind and brushed past Sun Yan's hair. A series of crackling sounds could be heard as the flame ignited a few strands of Sun Yan's hair. You're courting death. Sun Yan's eyes were bloodshot, and her killing intent surged. Senior brother Guan. Rong Yueshan, who had been watching the show from the sidelines, leaned over to Guan Tianyu's side. Why don't we take this opportunity to... Rong Yueshan made a killing gesture with her hand. Guan Tianyu looked at her, stunned. Although he didn't like Yunruoyan and Zhui Feng, all he wanted to do was teach them a lesson, not take their lives. However, he was happy to be a bystander and watch others kill the two of them. Let's wait a little longer, Guan Tianyu said. Sun Yan's too powerful, we might not even need to act. Yi Qianying noticed Guan Tianyu's hesitation and said, Senior brother Guan, these three are obviously suspecting us of plotting against Guan Ruliu and the others. If we let them out alive and report this to the Grand Elder, even if we can't find any concrete evidence, it'll still be troublesome for us. So, we might as well go all the way. Yi Qianying's words struck Guan Tianyu's greatest worry. Fine. If Sun Yan can't kill them, we'll make our move, Guan Tianyu decided. At this moment, Sun Yan, whose eyes were filled with killing intent, put away the dagger in her hand. With a flip of her hand, she took out a thin sword that flickered with silver light. Then, with a flash of her body, she disappeared once again. She's going to use a killing technique. Everyone, be careful. Guan Ruliu warned. Yunruoyan held her dagger in one hand and spiritual energy in the other, ready to unleash a fireball at a moment's notice. As Zhui Feng held his bow with both hands, he infused spiritual energy into the tiger canine arrowheads. At the moment, Guan Ruliu was only a 5th-rank blade master, the weakest of the three. Sun Yan was likely to target her first, so Yunruoyan and Zhui Feng had to focus on protecting her. The three of them nervously defended themselves for quite a while. Sun Yan didn't make a move, but their high concentration would quickly tire them out. In the cold weather, all three of them were sweating profusely. We can't go on like this, Yunruoyan murmured. Do you have any ideas? Guan Ruliu asked. Yunruoyan's brain raced. I do, but I'll have to trouble senior sister Guan to act as bait. As Sun Yan concealed herself, she searched for an opportunity to ambush the three of them. She knew that, although the three of them weren't as strong as she was, none of them were easy to deal with. It wouldn't be easy for her to kill the three of them either. All she could do was remain calm and wait for an opportunity to kill them all in one blow. However, the three of them were so well coordinated that Sun Yan couldn't find any openings. Just as Sun Yan was beginning to panic, she noticed a flaw in their plan. Guan Ruliu, who had been shielded by Yun Ruoyan and Zhuo Feng the entire time, seemed to have been so nervous that she lost her composure and exposed half of her body. Without hesitation, Sun Yan stepped forward, raised her thin sword, and slashed at Guan Ruliu's body. Yun Ruoyan's mental energy was being released to its fullest extent. Although she couldn't pinpoint Sun Yan's position, she was able to detect the silver light that shone from Sun Yan's thin sword. Without hesitation, Yun Ruoyan threw out the dark steel dagger in her hand, and at the same time, a fireball shot out. Sun Yan used her silver sword to block Yun Ruoyan's dagger, then used her wind-attuned spiritual energy to block the fireball. Just then, a snow-white arrowhead pierced through the fireball and into Sun Yan's chest. Pfft! Sun Yan spat out a mouthful of blood. She stared at the arrowhead in disbelief, then slowly collapsed to the ground, dead. They actually killed senior sister Sun. Yi Qianying cried out in shock. Guan Tianyu was also stunned by the sudden turn of events. Sun Yan's cultivation was the same as his, but her cultivation was more secretive. He had sparred with her in the past, but he had never won. Even his grandfather, the second elder, had praised Sun Yan for her prowess as a hunter. The combination of Sun Yan and Song Yi was unparalleled in the Northern College, and even in the entirety of Kongming Academy, they would be considered formidable. That was why the second elder had assigned them to protect Guan Tianyu. But he hadn't expected that both of them would die at Zhuo Feng's hands. Senior brother Guan, what are you waiting for? Let's attack together. Rong Yuashan called out, her heart burning with anxiety. She had already lost the best opportunity to kill Yun Ruoyan, but she still didn't act rashly. Guan Ruhai had warned her before entering the academy that the elders would place great importance on this training. As a result, no matter how much she wanted to kill Yun Ruoyan, she couldn't do it openly. Otherwise, the second elder would be the first to punish her. As a result, she had to do it discreetly and without anyone noticing. But there was one other possibility, provoking Guan Tianyu into attacking her. Guan Tianyu was the second elder's only descendant, and no matter what he did, the second elder would always protect him. As a result, accomplices like her wouldn't be severely punished either. Senior brother Guan, let's go. Pei Zio and Yi Qianying also called out. All right. Let's go. Guan Tianyu finally couldn't resist the urging of those around him. As soon as he called out, Rong Yuashan, Yi Qianying, and Pei Zio took out their weapons and charged toward Yun Ruoyan's group. Pei Zio's spear stabbed toward Yun Ruoyan without hesitation. Yun Ruoyan's dark steel dagger had fallen into a distant tree, and she had lost her weapon. Fortunately, Yun Ruoyan's reaction was fast enough to dodge Pei Zio's attack. By this time, Rong Yuashan was facing off against Zhuo Feng, and Yi Qianying was facing off against Guan Ruliu. Zhuo Feng's cultivation had been slightly lower than Rong Yuashan's, but after cultivating a wood-attuned external martial technique, his cultivation had improved tremendously. By now, he was able to fight Rong Yuashan without being at a disadvantage. Although Guan Ruliu's cultivation had dropped significantly, it was just enough to deal with Yi Qianying. Although Pei Zio had a weapon in his hands, Yun Ruoyan had used her bracelet to increase her cultivation. Her fireball technique and direct spiritual energy attacks were both much more powerful, and she was able to exchange a few blows with Pei Zio. Yun Ruoyan, I've always been accommodating to you, but you really don't know what's good for you. Today, I'm going to make you pay for this. Pei Zio pointed his spear at Yun Ruoyan, his eyes bloodshot. Then come at me. Cut the crap. Yun Ruoyan shouted, then threw several fireballs at Pei Zio. After dodging a few of them, Pei Zio turned around and thrust his spear at Yun Ruoyan. Yun Ruoyan bent her waist, and the tip of the spear brushed past her face. At this moment, Yun Ruoyan turned her hand and grabbed the spear's tip. A wave of spiritual energy, enhanced by her bracelet, flowed from Yun Ruoyan's hand to Pei Zio's hands. Pei Zio instantly felt a sharp pain in his hands, which quickly spread throughout his body, as if his entire body had been electrocuted in an instant. Pei Zio gritted his teeth and didn't let go. Instead, he released his spiritual energy to resist Yun Ruoyan's attack. However, he quickly discovered that Yun Ruoyan's spiritual energy was extremely strange. After a period of hard work, Pei Zio's cultivation was now at the peak of 7th rank, and he shouldn't be too far off from Yun Ruoyan's. However, he discovered that the amount of spiritual energy Yun Ruoyan was using to deal with him was much higher than his. Pei Zio felt that he wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. If he couldn't, even if he didn't die, he would be severely injured. Yun Ruoyan, on the other hand, was also struggling. She had expended quite a bit of spiritual energy in her battle with Sun Yen. If not for that, her 7th rank spiritual energy would have been boosted to the peak of 8th rank by the bracelet, and she wouldn't have been able to defeat Pei Zio. Now, however, she could only barely raise her spiritual energy to the early 8th rank. Senior brother Guan, I can't hold on much longer. Come help me. Pei Zio pleaded to Guan Tianyu, who had been standing by the side. Rong Yuashan and Yi Qianying were being held up by Zhuo Feng and Guan Ruliu respectively, and the only one who could help was Guan Tianyu. Guan Tianyu had been spoiled by the second elder, and he had developed a domineering and reckless personality. However, as soon as he left the second elder's protection, he would become even more cautious. Now that the three of them were fighting each other, it was time for him to strike. He took out his weapon, a large saber, and walked up to Yun Ruoyan. Brat, I didn't want to kill you, but you've offended too many people, and you know too much. If I don't kill you, I'll send you on your way. Guan Tianyu raised the saber in his hand and brought it down on Yun Ruoyan's head. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.